across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome to the home of common sense. Thank you to Peter. Back over the weekend right here on Talk, of course. Keir Starmer's premiership seems to be hanging by a bit of a thread. According to the latest YouGov poll, only 24% of people think he should stay. This, of course, follows the Mandelson scandal, but I think we can factor in other elements as well. We are still on the Starmer resignation countdown, by the way. Yesterday, we thought he might be gone by 4 o'clock. Today, will he be gone by 4 o'clock? Well, we will keep you updated if it happens. It will be a bit of significant news, of course. But who could or should replace him? Who is that person? We'll take calls and comments on that, and I'll put some meat on the bones in just a moment. Also, this afternoon, the BBC has announced the annual fee for a colour TV licence will increase once again, this time from £174.50 to £180. Can you still buy a black and white TV licence? Is that still possible? I don't know. And an NHS hospital trust has recruited a nurse to support families whose parents are close relatives. Bradford Teaching Hospital's NHS Foundation Trust advertised the position for a close relative marriage neonatal nurse stroke midwife. Really? More on that story as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. We have spent quite a lot of time talking about Epstein and Mandelson and Starmer. Not quite as much time talking about what happens next. What would happen if Starmer were to walk the plank? And much of this story seems to revolve around this woman.
This government is about making sure that working people are better off, and we'll intend to do that.
That's her. When she was depping at PMQs. Yesterday, though, Angela Rayner fired an opening salvo. This was her way of saying, move over, darling, Big Ange is in town. She would love that top job, of course. She's now on manoeuvres, weighing up her options, how much support she might have. As I mentioned at the beginning, only 24% of the public want Keir Starmer to stay on. Wouldn't you like to meet, by the way, just one of that 24% and just ask them why? 24% of people think Starmer should stay on because he's that good. But this, of course, is a game of be careful what you wish for, because while Angie was verbally threatening Starmer in the House of Commons, this man was also keeping busy.
How will you defend the idea to your constituents that other countries should own our national energy infrastructure, but Britain should not?
God, he's good. Ed Miliband, apparently seen in Downing Street measuring up the curtains. Maybe it's just a rumour. He, of course, would love the top job, having failed miserably previously to get it. But there's certainly, bizarre as this sounds, within Labour circles, there's a lot of love for Ed Miliband. However, Ed and Ange are not alone. There's more competition.
Politics is about choices. Labour chooses the well-being of the many, not the interests of the few, and we'll fight the election on those lines anytime.
Now, that was him in opposition. He then got the big job in health, and, of course, Wes Streeting would love... Wes, what, me, the Prime Minister? Don't be silly. I'm firmly behind the PM. Much in the same way as a wrecking ball is behind a house. That kind of behind. Wes Streeting, of course, is the younger candidate. He's a little more accessible. Many people in Labour think he's the man for the job. Others think he's still a bit of an upstart. So a trio of lefties. What is the collective noun, by the way, for a group of lefties? Broadcastable answers only. But this is the key to the reason I'm asking the question. If you're a Tory voter or a Reform voter, who would be the best leader for Labour? Because you can kind of see what would happen here. If Angela Rayner got the gig, or Ed Miliband got the gig, they would galvanise the left. So they would be able to, you know, those kind of floating voters or those voters who've suddenly decided that Zach Polanski of the Green Party is the modern-day Mahatma Gandhi, so therefore he's got to be your man. that group of floating voters who they want to go a bit left, they love a bit of lefty stuff, all of that virtue signalling dodgepots, the lot of that lot. An Ange and an Ed ticket, one or the other, or maybe even both, would potentially hoover that bit up. Now, we're streeting into the equation on this. He's previously said openly, despite the fact that Angela Rayner was fired as Deputy Prime Minister and the cabinet position because of some iffy tax affairs around stamp duty. Despite that, he said, you know, at some stage we'd like to welcome her back, which got people talking. Well, so is that the perfect ticket, as they would call it? Angela Rayner and Wes Streeting. I mean, these are the names we're talking about. It sounds woeful, doesn't it, that these are the best that we've got, or the best that Labour have got. So of those three, Angela, Ed, or of course Wes Streeting, would it be one of those that would be the most convenient appointment for you as a Reform voter or a Tory voter or even a Lib Dem voter? There's still a few out there. Which one would essentially flunk it so badly that your party would go straight through the middle and hoover up all the points on election day? Which one of those three? Or is it someone else? On a more serious question, is there someone in Labour that could actually salvage Labour, genuinely could come along and re-veneer credibility onto the Labour Party? 0344 499 1000. If Starmer went tomorrow, who would replace him? Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Political commentator Eve Tawfik is with us. Eve, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, lovely to be here.
Nice to have you with us. Well, let's start with Ange and Ed and Wes and all of them. I mean, it's all kicking off over there at Labour HQ, right? Rayner says, I'm ready to go. Starmer fighting for his political life. Ed Miliband sniffing around like a dog, and Wes Streeting pretending he doesn't really want the job but would kill for it. So, I mean, you take the point that I asked Eve at the beginning. I mean, if you're a Reform or a Tory voter, who is the candidate that could fill the job and ensure greater victory for your party, as it were?
I don't necessarily feel at the moment that there's any particular candidate that could do the job. I don't have hope for many of them. At the minute, I think it's a complete farce and a complete mess. So I'm really the wrong person to ask that exact question. But if I had a gun to my head, I would say, Miliband would be a good candidate for Labour.
Yep.
Hoping that he keeps to his promises, and potentially, if Reform were to get in, then I think Nigel Farage, for the populism, I think he would be accepted for a while, but he may end up in the same position that Boris was in the end. People get tired of populism and want to see policies.
Yeah, if you don't get it's all very well, isn't it? And if you look at the kind of promises, whether they're said overtly or kind of we imagine what the policy might be for Reform on things like immigration and net zero and stuff, if that kind of thing doesn't start to happen in the first year, then you're absolutely right. People are going to get very grumpy.
Yeah, I think we're very grumpy already. I think we've had enough, and I think Rayner is after that hot seat. And if it weren't for the issue of the stamp duty, she was a fantastic, rags to riches story, single parent, really cared about her area, connected with her voters. And then it's that, great power corrupt story, my second home, my hot tub or what have you, whatever she has been enjoying with the fruits of her labour, as it were. That was a double entendre there. But, I think she would love the place, but I don't know if she'd be able to do the job anymore. Is the same passion she had when she was clawing her way to the top, is it still there?
Trouble is with Angela Rayner is that, because you're right, what you said, when she was in opposition and she would be standing there at the dispatch box taking Boris Johnson to task and doing a reasonable job of it, that kind of working class girl route, that really impressed me. I thought, God, if anybody could have told her when she was 16, absolutely skint, trying to bring up a baby on her Todd, that fast forward a few years, she'll be standing, holding the Prime Minister to account in the Houses of Parliament. I loved that. However, once I've got beyond that romanticism of that, though, Eve, I'm not sure there's much else going on with Angela Rayner. I don't think she's necessarily that bright, and I don't mean that as a cheap insult, and genuinely, because there's quite a lot of them not that bright. I'd include Ed Miliband in the list as well. I don't know whether she could do the job, but Labour people would like her because they go, well, it's the first, we've never had a female leader, so they'd quite like that.
I don't think that's particularly important, and I'm saying that as a female myself.
You know, I agree, it shouldn't be, but for some reason, some people dine out on that kind of malarkey.
Yeah, I mean, tokenism, yes, great. Female leader, fantastic. Same with the US, they're sort of angling for the female leader. But I feel it should be somebody who can actually do the job. And at the moment, I think, you know, the last government and certainly the current government, we're not actually seeing the job happening. All we're getting at the minute is from, you know, the very top places in Westminster down to the cucumbers in Aldi, we're seeing higher prices, higher rents, lower wages, and that brings on to the BBC story, really. You know, their excuse was, well, we increased it in line with inflation. Well, how about we consider increasing other things with inflation, like wages, for instance?
Be nice.
You know, instead of, yes, we must increase our TV licence. I don't think that many people are bothered at the moment about paying for the BBC.
No.
There are plenty of other options. Streaming at the moment rules, and if the BBC wants to overcharge for their, quite frankly, substandard in some areas services, then go ahead and do so.
Well, let's have a reminder of exactly what you're talking about and the kind of stuff they still knock out on a weekly basis.
Don't worry about it. It ain't your concern.
Dancing their couple's choice. Fleur East and Vito Coppel.
This is the Celebrity Traitors.
Traitors, EastEnders, bit of Strictly, they're kind of their biggest kind of shows. Eve, I don't know if you're a fan of any one of those?
I used to love a bit of Easties, as I used to call it, back in the sort of Phil Mitchell, Sharon days. Revealing my age here. Strictly, I can see its appeal. Again, used to like it. I could see why people tune in. But aside from that, you know, you're looking for movies on BBC iPlayer. There's really nothing there. There's some strange black and white films that, you know, not Casablanca and things like that, but, you know...
You wouldn't mind if it was.
Yeah, you know, something like the 29th Plane that we've never heard of, never seen, and it's just some kind of strange addition to their library. And, you know, I think using inflation is an inflaming phrase, quite frankly, considering what inflation is costing the regular person, the average person.
Well, I mean, it's going up from £174.50 to £180. They call this the colour TV licence because apparently, I'm told you can still get a black... Where can you buy a black and white TV?
Yeah, I mean, who watches TV in black and white? It's apart from maybe some subculture of people who live underground, possibly, and listen to strange music.
Yeah.
You know, apart from that, no one really owns a black and white TV.
My mate, colourblind Baz, he quite likes it.
Yeah, to be fair, they're
all black and white to him, so I don't know what licence he pays.
Well, he should be paying the 58. He should be. He shouldn't be paying for a coloured TV at all.
Well, it'd be foolish to go down the colour route in his particular position. Can I just say, The 29th Plane is a great movie. I won't spoil it for you at the end. It's really worth a watch. I'd suggest you get over to iPlayer and have a look.
I may do that later, after I've watched I haven't finished Bridgerton this week, so... Yeah.
OK. Is that still going, that thing? That's been going like 100 years now, hasn't it? It seems it.
Yes, it has, yeah. Each series, it's 2 years to come out for the next one.
Wow.
And, a sibling per series it's meant to be, but they've squashed it together a bit.
Gotcha. The BBC, of course, are the kind of stuff. They do make some of the world's biggest shows in one respect, and I mean in TV terms. So I've never understood why the BBC don't make like things like Doctor Who, Strictly. This kind of stuff is sold all around the world. It must be sold for millions. So I can never work out. Top Gear, there's another one, sold all around the world for millions. EastEnders, I think that is shown possibly in Australia, New Zealand, maybe Canada, I don't know. I mean, these are really valuable bits of TV real estate, as it were. How could they ever be skint?
Yeah,
just on those 5 shows.
I don't believe that they are, and these are great shows. I'm not saying the BBC, I was being a bit facetious. I'm not saying the entirety of the BBC has terrible shows, but when you're on a streaming by streaming basis, comparing with the other giants, Netflix, Amazon, Disney Plus, it doesn't hold its own in that respect. But in terms of as you say, the real estate that the BBC commands, and also you've got BBC World News, which you can hear news stories from other cultures fairly easily and from that BBC neutral perspective, which is really important rather than consuming media, that isn't owned, British-owned media. Not that we should also exclusively consume that.
No, that's true. But you're right. I mean, the arguments, as I saw it, used for the BBC to retain the licence fee were only ever really kind of romantic arguments, if that makes sense. They were like, it's the BBC, it's part of our culture, it's this, it's that. Saturday night, watching those great TV shows and, Gladiators and God knows, whatever. It was a romantic, but you can't any longer in a streaming world really find an intelligent argument to support the notion of that model. My kids... My oldest in particular has heard of the BBC. He doesn't think of a BBC as a channel. He wouldn't know what Channel 4 was. He'd have no... If I said, what side is it on, that sentence wouldn't even mean anything to him because he just looks at a screen, he just picks a show he wants. Whether it might be on the BBC, probably never actually, but it might be on Netflix, it might be on Disney, Amazon, whatever. So the whole... And that's the new generation. So,
definitely.
It's very hard to kind of sell it as one perhaps would have done a couple of years back.
And for children as well, I remember when my children were small, we'd watch a lot of CBeebies. That was our bedtime routine, in the night garden or the nightmare garden, as I called it.
That was a weird show, right?
Like, imagine if you were partial to some chemicals and then watched that.
It'd send you right over the edge, that thing, wouldn't it? Yeah.
But yes, so the BB back to the children. That was a really good place to go for the kids. But as they get older, as you say, what side is it on? That's like VCR for them, DVD player. These are just meaningless sentences.
Correct.
And it is part of the UK culture and part of our heritage, and a lot of people are still happy to pay for it. I, for one, am not. I don't think it's worth it anymore. I'll be sad to miss out on some shows, but at the end of the day, I have a plethora of shows at my fingertips to choose from. Almost too much choice to the point where you don't know what to watch sometimes.
And you can watch it wherever you like as well, whether it's on your phone, I mean, who'd have thought any of that? People would be watching television. People would be watching television. Told Alexander Graham Bell that. People would be watching television on a telephone. That would just be... you'd be carted away for lunacy if you said that out loud not so long back. Stay with us, Eve. Loads to get through. More stories to come. 0344 499 1000. And that question, if Starmer went tomorrow, who should replace him? And I don't mean like you saying, Nigel Farage or Kemi Badenoch. I mean, within Labour, who should replace him? Which would be advantageous to whoever you vote for. So if you vote for Reform or the Tories, maybe even the little old Lib Dems, who is the best person to have as the next Labour leader in order to ensure that the party you support gets an even bigger victory? 0344 499 1000.
on the point about who will lead. I mean, you need a leader who will appeal to the country, not just someone who appeals to the Labour Party. I completely accept the argument that you can't just have someone who indulges the wishes of the Labour Party. You need someone who's going to appeal to the country. For me, I think the only person who comes near that is Shabana Mahmood. And if it ever came to a leadership election, I would like to see her stand.
Well, she'd be the best of a bad lot in my view. I think she's unfortunately too right-wing for that electorate, Paul Embry.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I did inadvertently ask about a collective noun for lefties. Jay says leftists, loons of lefties, an asylum of lefties, a tantrum of leftists. Sue says collective nouns, a leech of lefties, a liar of lefties. Like that. A loon of lefties, there it is again. A plague of lefties, yeah, that might work too. I can think of others, but I don't think Ofcom will be particularly delighted if we went down that route. We have Eve Tawfik with us, political commentator, journalist, looking at the big stories of the day. Let's move to this one, Eve. The Home Office have said how nearly 60,000 unauthorised migrants and convicted criminals have been removed or deported from the UK since Labour took office. So has Keir Starmer finally done this?
You will have helped to smash the gangs. Take those gangs down. But smashing the gangs. No shortcut. Smash the criminal gangs. No gimmicks. Have to smash those gangs. Just the hard graft of sleeves rolled up. Smash the gangs. Practical government. I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. We will smash the gangs that undermine our security. Smash the gangs. Smash the people smuggling gangs. Smash the gangs.
I will never tire of listening to that. The people smuggling guns. It's a beauty. So he's claiming some...
Smash the gangs, yeah. I mean, that should be remixed into a, techno song. I really like that.
There's some that, yeah, and they play it while watching The Night Garden, maybe. You know, it's got all sorts of things going on. So in terms of, I mean, obviously the Labour government are saying this is a success. You know, we got rid of 60,000 people. I think there is a bit more detail behind the headlines, but can they call this, them doing what voters wanted them to do?
Well, I wouldn't say that using taxpayer money, up to 1 million or over 1 million of taxpayer money to... because of wrongful imprisonment on their part, due to our justice system, which should be thorough and isn't thorough, as we found out due to the IPP prisoner crisis. And this was Shabana Mahmood's baby. And it was, there are people there serving 20-year sentences for stealing a mobile phone. There are men who haven't seen their sons in 14 years and they're turned away at Manchester prison. Again, these are petty criminals. These things are all happening behind the scenes with the prison system. And this was meant to be Labour's, big success. And but, accidentally in the meantime, they've released the likes of Billy Smith and other criminals whilst taking taxpayer money. I mean, there were, I think last year, 214 wrongly accused, and their compensation was over 900,000.
Wow. I'd do an extra 3 days in the chiller for a slice of that.
Yeah, I mean, there was compensation ranging from, £250 to £500,000. And, the fact that this is all coming out of taxpayer money is ludicrous when the taxpayer hasn't got, we're struggling as it is to live in what we're calling the UK, soon to be known as the fourth or fifth Reich, whatever you want to call it. I'm sure Ofcom won't like that either. But it's just I feel that the justice system needed to be more thorough. Everyone knew there were huge backlogs when it came to legal resources, legal aid, and it just seems sloppy. These are highly trained people, highly trained lawyers, judges, and the whole thing seems sloppy. How can you wrongly imprison 214 people?
Yes, quite a record, that, isn't it? I mean, if you want to do the ineptitude Olympics, I mean, that one's carrying the gold at every level, I would guess. I'm sure we're going to hear more of it, and possibly that figure could even be higher. These are just the figures we managed to uncover. Let's finally move to this story, Eve. This is the NHS Hospital Trust, who's recruited a nurse to support families where parents are close relatives, like cousins marrying. Bradford Teaching Hospital's NHS Foundation Trust advertised the position for a close relative marriage, neonatal nurse or midwife. Now, you may remember when one independent MP spoke in the Commons specifically against the banning of first cousin marriage. This is Iqbal Mohammed. Have a listen to him.
We should try to step into the shoes of those who perhaps are not from the same culture as ours, to better understand why the practice continues to be so widespread. An estimated 35 to 50% of all sub-Saharan African populations either prefer or accept cousin marriages, and it is extremely common in the Middle East and in South Asia. I would therefore urge the House to vote against this motion and to find a more positive approach to addressing the issues that are caused by first cousin marriages.
Yeah, interesting one. This is very common in the Middle East, but of course he's not an MP in the Middle East, which is sort of vaguely interesting.
Being someone from the Middle East, half Egyptian here, this is practiced in the countryside, in Aswan, in Lower Egypt. Like Cairo is very much like London. You know, there are different rules and regulations surrounding dating, obviously a very different dating culture, but a sweeping statement to generalise that the Middle East are those ones where you're practicing first cousin marriage as rote is completely incorrect and reductionist and wrong. However, I will say that first cousin marriage, which was practiced in the UK for many, many hundreds of years due to lineage, power, and we know about the Roman Empire, brothers and sisters to keep
royalty.
The line going. So, you know, it was created for that fact and also continued in poorer communities, not just for lineage, because, you know, you didn't have that much of a choice. You didn't have Tinder or Grindr or what have you, or Hinge. You couldn't go out there and find someone.
So you went round your Auntie Maureen's and married your cousin?
Yeah. Exactly, and you know, it's Billy that you grew up with, or you know.
But isn't the problem with this quite an obvious one, and that is that there are demonstrable health implications, sometimes terrifying ones, which is the reason why it isn't conventional any longer. But there are some cultures or religions that want it to remain. But there are good reasons why it isn't, generally speaking.
Yeah, 100%. And I do agree in a way that. The relationship side of things, do as you please, but when having a baby and subjecting a child to potentially, you know, life-altering or conditions that need to be treated forever, or medications that are needed for conditions that cost a lot of money that wouldn't necessarily have to cost that amount of money. But, you know, where do we draw the line here? It's the same as smokers, you know, they put themselves in this position. Well, you know, the same MP said, why should we have to pay for first cousin marriages? It was in a news article today in the Telegraph. It was a payment issue. Why should we be paying for this? Well, it's, you know, you could say the same about a million other conditions, a million other things. In fact, many of our choices lead to health conditions, some do not. But in this instance, obviously, the choice led to the condition. But the specialist nurse needed for that indicates, is there an issue with culture here? Is it culture perpetuating the idea of incest? I mean, it has been, you know, I actually looked at the figures. It has been one of the top searches on adult websites for years. Incest, brother and sister, stepfather. You know, this is something that people fantasize about. In 2015 went through the roof.
Well, there's a lot of freaky mamas out there, it's fair to say. Listen, Eve, we hit the clock, but it's been great to have you on. We will speak again. Nice to see you, Eve Tawfik, political commentator and journalist. Thank you to her. Over to you on any of that you've just heard. In particular, that question of Keir Starmer, if he was to walk the plank, who should replace him? Not because it's somebody you necessarily like, but somebody that give the party you do support an even greater chance. Or is there someone out there, just a genuine question as an observer, even if it's not your party, who would actually be good for Labour? Who would be a good Labour leader? Keir Starmer has not been a good Labour leader. Ed Miliband's a bit bonkers. Angela Rayner's a bit tainted now, and I think that job would just be too big for the likes of her and Wes Streeting. Who should it be? 0344 499 1000. That's where you'll find us. Just gone 1:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Dave in Tenbury Wells says collective nouns for lefties, a pronoun of lefties. I like that. There's some thought gone into that one, Dave. Thank you very much indeed for that. This from Gary. Is there a good one to choose from? Really, Starmer is possibly the best of a really bad bunch. If I had to begrudgingly pick one, it would be John Healey. He seems to have a bit more common sense. That's about it. I still think that Blair is involved somehow. Almost everything we talk about, all roads, they talk about all roads lead back to the Romans. I think in Westminster, all roads, certainly over there in Labour HQ, all roads lead back to Tony Blair. Margaret in Birmingham, just a thought, memo to Keir Starmer. If you want to stay in number 10, big U-turn on Chagos, stop the pull factor and tell them we'll get nothing. Simple as that. There are some really simple things that we all sit there, and I know we're all kind of armchair prime ministers, aren't we, from Sergeant? If I was prime minister, I would do this. You've got this big kind of wish list in your head as to what you think you could do. And then you get the job. You think, why? Just do that. Just do that, and people will be very happy indeed. That's all you have to do. Keir Starmer continues to battle, really, for his political life. And now the wagons are circling, it seems. Angela Rayner seemed to throw her hat into the ring. Could we be soon seeing a battle between Rayner, Miliband and Streeting? They seem to be the three names that are up there constantly. We'll talk to Charlie Rowley shortly. First, Emma Burnell, editor at Labour List. Emma, nice to see you again. What the heck? I mean, this once proud party, when the other Keir was running the show years back, I mean, what's happened here? It's all gone pear-shaped.
The party's not in the best place at the moment. I'm not going to put a gloss on it. I mean, I think it's rescuable as a party, rescuable as a government, but we are not had the greatest of weeks, and I'm not going to lie about that.
Yeah. What about? I mean, this. I've never known a time, and you, I'm sure, would echo this as well. Whoever is the prime minister of whatever party, there's always kind of an animated group who want that person to go, even if they are normally a supporter of that party. Get them out. You know, if you ask anyone in the street, you know, do you like the Prime Minister, you're always going to get a big percentage go, no, they're all rubbish. That's a kind of common answer, and I suppose that's amplified somewhat these days with social media and the like. However, there does seem to be now, because of the nature of what has happened here, and it obviously involving a very high-profile former politician in Peter Mandelson, and who he was involved with, and whether the Prime Minister did or didn't know certain bits of information. This is not just tittle-tattle, right? This is a very serious matter right now.
Yeah, I think what's happened with Mandelson is incredibly serious. It was gross when it was the stuff around just being friends with someone who we knew was a convicted paedophile.
Yep.
Raised to the level of extraordinarily serious when we saw the kind of information that it's said as being passed. I don't want to say anything that would prejudice the police investigation, but I'm glad there's a police investigation happening around that. That is beyond gross. That's quite possibly levels of treasonous. So I think we are talking about a very, very, very difficult and very serious situation that could have been avoided. Frankly, Mandelson's appointment was a risky choice, and that risk has not paid off.
What does Labour need? I mean, do Labour need to go more to the left? These are the questions that every party, and the Tories are having the same kind of conversations about this. It's always said that elections are won from the centre, although there is now perhaps some evidence that where the centre is has kind of moved a bit. What does Labour need to do? Do they need to go back to that kind of even more core roots, so that you are kind of echoing the voice and the politics of someone like Jeremy Corbyn? Is that the place they need to be?
I think Labour has a really, really difficult situation on its hands, because they are facing threats, electoral threats from both the left and the right, in terms of sort of green populism and reform populism. I think it's not really about going, oh, let's be, super Corbynite left wing, or being super Blairite right wing. I mean, right wing in Labour terms, not in political terms. It's more about saying, OK, these are the things we are going to do. These are the evidence points that we will show along the way to doing them and doing them. Frankly, that is how you need to approach this. It's, you've got to say, well, what are the outcomes? What is the change? That word on the front of the manifesto. What is that change? And how do we then go about making sure, A, that it's delivered, and B, that it's felt?
So who are the names on the tin, then, that you would apply in this respect, Emma? I mentioned Angela Rayner, Wes Streeting, Ed Miliband. I think all of those, if the job came up, all of those three would definitely apply for it.
We don't know who is and isn't going to put their hat in the ring yet. There are lots of names floating around. Those three I've heard. People are talking about Al Khan's. I think it's in the Ministry of Defence. We just don't know what the contest will shape up like. And I think that, frankly, is one of the biggest questions that is happening amongst Labour MPs, because until they can kind of solidify around an option, then they will stay stuck in this place that they're in at the moment.
Have you got a name you can give us, do you think, Emma, that would be the absolute election-winning banger of a leader?
Ian, as editor of Labour List, I am neutral in all these things.
Of course, yeah. You might scupper a good interview if you tell us the wrong name.
Well, I mean, we won't take sides. We're there to cover the whole of the Labour Party.
What are your readers telling you?
Our readers are quite interesting. We do a lot of polling of the Labour List readers, and we did some head-to-head polling just before Christmas on if Keir Starmer versus various people. Mm-hmm. And there were some who would beat him, which I think included Angela Rayner and Andy Burnham. Now, obviously, Andy Burnham isn't currently qualified to run. Closer were Wes Streeting and Ed Miliband, and Keir Starmer was ahead of Shabana Mahmood, who is also talked about. When it comes to the popularity of the cabinet, Ed Miliband outstrips other cabinet members quite significantly, but less so when it was in that head-to-head, which I think is interesting when it comes to what Labour members want. They like what Ed's doing in his department, and they like the way he's doing it. They don't necessarily think that that means he should run for leader.
And it also depends sometimes if people can see two names, like a leader and a deputy leader, then that often changes the dynamic again. Emma, great to have you on again. Thank you. Emma Burnell is the editor of Labour List. If you want to read elements of what those guys talk about over there, then get over to labourlist.org. In the meantime, we continue to take your calls and comments on who should replace Keir Starmer. I nearly said Gordon Brown then. Who should replace Keir Starmer? I mentioned the big three: Angela Rayner, Wes Streeting, Ed Miliband. They all rule themselves out, don't they, when they're asked the question. Let's have a listen and a reminder. It was only last year on Sky News when Angela Rayner was asked about whether she would want to be the leader. Here's what she said.
Absolutely not. And I don't want to be leader of the Labour Party. I'm very happy and honoured to do the job.
What kind of politician are you? You don't want to be leader of your party?
No, I'm very happy and honoured and to be Deputy Prime Minister of this country. And I've got a lot in my in tray to prove that I can do the job that I'm doing and deliver on the milestones for the people of this country. That's what I'm interested in, Trevor.
You know this is being recorded, don't you? Because actually, that means one day, if you do, somebody's going to play it back to you.
Absolutely. I'll be happy for you to play it back to me. I have no desire to go for the leadership of the Labour Party. My desire is to deliver for the people of this country who have given me opportunities beyond what I could have dreamed of.
I don't believe a word of that. Angela Rayner saying, no, I've got no desire to be. I've heard it so many times. Wes Streeting, of course, echoes that, as I said at the beginning. He's like, and they always say, I'm firmly behind the Prime Minister, and I said at the top, firmly behind the PM, much in the same way as a wrecking ball is firmly behind a house. So, yes, they will all say that, but they all want the big job. Charlie Rowley is with us, a diehard socialist, of course, a man firmly of the left. For those who don't know Charlie, they're probably thinking, oh, right, there's another lefty coming on. Charlie is not that person, the very antitheses of all of that. Good to see you, Charlie.
Great to see you. Good afternoon.
Have I seen you this year? Maybe?
Oh, maybe once. In passing, if not on air.
Happy Christmas. Happy New Year, all the rest of it. So it's always kind of popcorn time, isn't it, when another party is kind of battling it out. At the core of this is a really serious issue because it's about Mandelson and the Epstein thing. What did the PM know? What did he not know? We've discussed that endlessly this week. We're now looking at the next chapter of this, and that is if Starmer goes, who replaces him?
Well, that is the question, and one which no one really knows the answer to, because in order to get rid of the Prime Minister, it requires 80 Labour members of Parliament to actually sign a letter to go to the Prime Minister and say, we are backing this person. Yeah. But when you have a Labour Party that is divided into those camps, whether it's pro-Ange, as we call her, whether it's Wes Streeting or whether it's Shabana Mahmood or Ed Miliband, that does seem to have quite a popularity amongst younger Labour voters. Certainly one sign, all because of the environmental stuff. They're very
Is it that? Yeah, but Ed Miliband, I look at Ed Miliband and you know how, and more so now than ever, it isn't just about your policies. It's a bigger package now in terms of what you've got to kind of achieve, the optics of it, you know, who you are, how you... So Wes Streeting comes across very well. If he gives an interview, he loves to throw in a popular culture reference, doesn't he? You know, I was watching Traitors last night, and it's like, yeah, all right, Wes, yeah, you watch Traitors, so what? But so he's a bit more accessible in that sense, working class boy, made good, etc. So is Angela Rayner in that respect. Miliband can't quite claim that the class war thing, not that should be what it's all about. But I always just look at Miliband and think, you know, he's kind of comedic. He's a sort of parody of himself, almost. And he also tries to do those buttock-clenching kind of sort of satirical, vaguely comedic videos, doesn't he?
Yes.
Which are just awful.
They are. But he seems to, for some reason, they seem to take off because I think you are that sort of cringe dad, maybe even borderline sort of granddad-esque type of comedy that people on TikTok, young people anyway, or other social media, seem to seem to enjoy. But I can't see, I can see Ed Miliband getting the job amongst the Labour Party, but I can't see the country having had the opportunity to vote in Ed Miliband before and rejected him quite severely in 2015. Then why on earth he should be able to just become Prime Minister through the back door? I don't think it'll go down very well with the public.
It's interesting. He's apparently very humorous as well. When you're with him, in a kind of like, I've always thought Michael Gove, a man, of course, who you know, who's a very witty, sharp, funny guy. But often with politicians, that's not what they're on TV to do, so you don't always see that. And I'm told that, and I know, as you do, that Michael Gove can tell a good, he's kind of Stephen Fry territory in telling an anecdote, and Ed Miliband is kind of apparently a bit of that. But you stick him through the lens of a camera and he looks like a half-wit.
Yes, yeah. And I think, look, time might have helped him, now that he's not been leader of the Labour Party for a long time. He's gone away, he's come back, he's continued to support the Labour Party on the front bench, even when they're in opposition. So maybe he's a bit more relaxed, maybe he's maybe able to take the fight to reform, which is what the Labour Party need to do, and also keep out the Tories. That's what the Labour needs to do.
What's interesting about this, sort of overarchingly interesting, Charlie, is that it took 10 years for Blair to be involved in a conversation about his premiership like this. This is 18 months, and they're talking about the leader, and it isn't just the Mandelson stuff. That's, of course, become the big one, almost the stick of dynamite that's been thrown into Starmer's leadership. But it's all the U-turns and all the other stuff as well. And, Keir Starmer, as it turned out, is just not that good at being a Prime Minister.
Yeah, and I think, look, everyone said it for a long time, he doesn't get the politics, and that is to an extent okay if you are a good communicator. But if you
he's not that either.
But he's not that either. And if you stake your character on being the former director of public prosecutions, that you're going to do things totally differently to those infighting, terrible Tories. That Boris Johnson was breaking all the rules left, right, and centre. I'm going to be that change that Emma was talking about, that you all can enjoy and have as someone that is whiter than white, a former lawyer. But he's now involved in a scandal where actually you wouldn't book him to sort of get you off a parking fine, let alone...
You really wouldn't, would you? Well, that bloke there, if he goes back into chambers, as I think it's called, after this gig, I mean, he's never going to get any work, is he?
No. So
you're meant to be the most forensic, analytical mind in the legal world. You were the chief lawyer of the UK, and you couldn't work out that, appointing a man that was up close and personal with a paedophile for a number of years, and while he was a Secretary of State, stayed in the paedophile's house while he was in jail for child sex offences. And Keir Starmer didn't know any of this? I find that impossible.
Exactly. And even if he doesn't read the newspapers, and even if he doesn't sort of get involved in gossipy conversations and doesn't know who knows who and to what extent or whatever, what Kemi Badenoch did earlier on in the week was to pin the Prime Minister down by saying, when the Prime Minister had the national security vetting document in front of him, did it mention a relationship between Peter Manson and Epstein? And he said yes. Now, if that does appear on a national security vetting document, it's not going to be in a positive light.
No, it's not.
It's going to raise a concern, and yet the Prime Minister who made the political appointment overrode that concern, which I think that is the question of his judgment.
And it must have said in there, because it's impossible that when Mandelson was business secretary, he was also first Secretary of State, which puts him as the second most powerful figure. Behind the Prime Minister was Gordon Brown at the time. It goes off to America and he stays in Epstein's house. It would be ridiculous to assume no one knew where he was staying. His own department, the Cabinet Office, number 10, the old bill. I mean, someone must have known where he was staying.
Totally.
That information must have been in the briefing.
Oh, absolutely. And that, I think, will be, as part of the humble address, that parliamentary manoeuvre that took place on Wednesday, that will bring out all of the correspondence between Peter Manson and Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, when are we going to see this?
Everything within the government files. But this was the other thing. Well, let's hope it's very soon. But the way that the Prime Minister, again, misjudged the situation by trying to say well, we'll leave it to the cabinet secretary, so the most senior civil servant, to look into all of this. When Gordon Brown, who you mentioned early on, had already written to the cabinet secretary to say, I want information, and he'd already flagged it. So there's no confidence in the system that the Prime Minister tried to put forward as a solution. That's why Angela Rayner stood up and said, actually, no, she was sensing the mood. She might have more of a political antenna than the Prime Minister, and said that's why the Intelligence Security Committee needs to look at.
And just as a kind of PS to that, and I know Gordon Brown, you know, has been getting some, you know, some positive comments about the fact that he tried to flag this. But I would say, just to add to that, 16 years ago, when his Secretary of State was staying at Jeffrey Epstein's house, did the Prime Minister of the day not know that? Where's Peter? He's on holiday. Where's he staying? He's gone to New York. I thought he was meant to be going to Washington. No, he changed it to New York. He's staying at a friend's house. Which friend? Did he not know that then?
Well, I think if he did, then that plays into why people think the politics of our country is broken, because there are too many people prepared to overlook people that are just, you know, flirting with other people in positions of power.
Just finally, Charlie, we've mentioned these three names: Angela Rayner, Wes Streeting, Ed Miliband. If Starmer goes, is it going to be one of those three, or is there another name you would introduce into this?
Well, Emma did mention Al Kearns, who is, I think, the Veterans Minister, or certainly in the MOD. That is a name that keeps coming up, and I don't know why, because, again, I don't think the public will just accept.
Who is that, sorry?
Something. I think he is the Veterans Minister.
Who are you talking about?
Oh, Al Kearns? Is it Al Kearns?
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Who Emma, I think, mentioned.
Oh, right,
as
okay.
well. But it's a name that I've heard a couple of times. But I don't think that's a possibility. No. I think it will have to be.
Because no one's heard it, even me.
No,
okay,
yeah, exactly. So I think it will.
That's politics.
It could be. It could be Angela Rayner or Wes Streeting.
We will see. Charlie, good to see you again. Charlie Rowley with us on the programme. Over to you, 0344 499 1000.
On the point about who will lead, I mean, you need a leader who will appeal to the country, not just someone who appeals to the Labour Party. I completely accept the argument that you can't just have someone who indulges the wishes of the Labour Party. You need someone who's going to appeal to the country. For me, I think the only person who comes near that is Shabana Mahmood. And if it ever came to a leadership election, I would like to see her stand.
Well, she'd be the best of a bad lot in my view. I think she's unfortunately too right-wing for that electorate, Paul Embry.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
5 to 2. Let's get some calls on this one. Jill's in Cornwall. What are you thinking, Jill? Afternoon to you.
Hi, Ian. How are you?
Yeah, good as gold, thank you.
Well, to be perfectly honest, there is no replacement, as far as I'm concerned, that I'm prepared to accept. Ever since they got into power, things have worse and worse. And as far as I'm concerned, their sole, each individual, their sole aim in their politics is to better themselves, get as much as they can for themselves, power-wise, finance-wise, you name it. And at the moment, everything that is ever reported about the politicians, even if you don't know what party they're in, it's corrupt. the thought that someone's just going to step down because of Mandelson and someone's going to pick up the reins and take over is going to be better. No, it's not.
Yeah.
It isn't, and I've lost.
But would it be if you were? I always try to put myself in the position of, you know, if I was voting for Labour, who would I want to be my leader now? Who do you think could do that job if you were a Labour voter, Jill?
Well, Mickey Mouse, if his name was up there.
Yeah, I think he's up there. I think he's going to be on the ticket.
I think I'd probably go with that.
Yeah.
At the moment, unfortunately, I can't think of anyone that I would be prepared to put the reins of this country in their hands. I'm very worried about the people of this country who live and support everything, pay everything, and are suffering as a result of this particular party. And I don't know that any party that's going to step in is going to do a better job.
Yeah.
But to know who to replace Starmer, no.
I also wonder, on the wider point about political appetites, has the, you know, to go back to the discussion we were having a little earlier about the adage that political parties only win if they stand in the centre. So whether they're Labour or Tory, if you get to the centre ground, that's where you hoover up the vote. But that centre has, I know geometrically that would be impossible. The centre has changed, though, right?
Yes, I mean,
I think the left-wing politics, I don't think, are the thing of the day.
I don't know what left-wing is anymore.
Well, indeed, or even what right-wing is anymore, I suppose, because it's all kind of mashed up a bit. But if you take typical left, you know, when I hear the likes of Rayner and people like that, you can see underpinning their kind of more modern approach, as they would call it, to Labour. There is still very much the old socialist in there. I think the appetite for that has gone.
Well, yes.
In the wider country.
I can't. I mean, Ed Miliband, I worry if he gets in.
Yeah.
The politician from up country, who I can't think of his blessed name now. For God's sake, there's so many of them.
Yeah.
They all seem to have a train of thought that doesn't appear to be what's good for this country.
Yeah, well, I think they are, and I see it more on the left than I see it on the right. I think they are very much ingrained in a kind of an old ideology. They just can't get out of it. Jill, thank you very much indeed for starting us off. More on the other side of the news, 0344 499 1000. Right now it's 2 o'clock. Let's get the latest news headlines.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Yes, it is the home of common sense. Loads to come. We've been talking about Keir Starmer. Who should, quite serious question, who should replace him? Not necessarily somebody you absolutely love and adore, but from a party perspective that you vote for. If you're a Reform voter or a Conservative voter, who would you like to see in the top job should Starmer walk the plank that would make it easy for your man or woman to make it to number 10? This, of course, comes after the Mandelson scandal, which is not by a long shot over with yet. We'll have more on that. Also, the BBC has announced their annual colour TV licence will increase. Currently, it's £174.50. It's going to go up to £180. I would love to hear the defence that says you still believe it's great value for money. I think that argument is harder than it's ever been to try and make. So thoughts on that as well. And the NHS Hospital Trust that has recruited a nurse to support families where parents are close relatives. This is Bradford Teaching Hospital's NHS Foundation. They looked for and advertised a position for a close relative marriage neonatal nurse or midwife. Essentially, cousins marrying. That's the territory we're looking at here. More on that story as well. Everything you need to know and all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. We did ask, by the way, what is the collective noun for a group of lefties? I don't think there actually is one. We were asking for broadcastable examples. And Mark in Stratford says, and I think I knew this, the collective noun should be a pratfall of lefties, which is actually the collective noun of a group of clowns. Did you double check that, Finn? So a group of clowns is called a I don't know what anybody ever went to. How was the circus? Was it all you took the kids? Oh, it was great. There was a pratfall of clowns. They were just fantastic. No one ever said that, did they? Anyhow, let's move to more serious matters. This is the Home Office. They've said that nearly 60,000 unauthorised migrants and convicted criminals have now been removed or deported from the UK since Labour took office. Ka-ching, trebles all round, pats on the back over there at Labour HQ. We've done more than the Tories did. Don't let anyone ever say the left don't know how to control immigration. Or did they? Let's speak firstly with Robert Bates, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Good to see you, Robert.
Thanks for having me.
Behind every big headline, there is usually another story, and I'm pretty sure there's another one here as well.
And that is absolutely the case. So this 60,000 number, it does sound impressive. It sounds a big sort of, and it conjures up images of people being put on chartered flights and being removed from the country. In reality,
just shy of 1,000 a week.
In reality, over a third of these people actually left without the Home Office even realising that they had left the country until much later.
That takes us down by 20,000.
It takes us down by a considerable number. Another quarter of that number were paid to go. They were controlled and assisted returns where the Home Office effectively bribes an illegal migrant or a foreign criminal to leave the country. So that's about 40 million has so far been spent by the Labour government getting these guys to leave the country. And then you get the tiny number that is the deportations, about a quarter. But within that quarter of those that were actually deported, what you see is most of them were Europeans. They weren't individuals from those nationalities that we know were problematic, the Afghanistans, Eritrea, Sudans, and so forth. A significant number of them were Europeans, and actually the numbers that came from those nationalities that crossed the boats was only about 33 deportations in the last year.
So this is Jean-Pierre from France who's overstayed his student visa or something?
And a large part of it is actually an agreement that was signed by the last Conservative government with Albania, which has allowed a big uptick in the numbers being returned to Albania as well. So overall, actually, it's so much smoke and mirrors leading with this headline. I think it's really disingenuous that you've got a Home Secretary and immigration ministers coming out and parroting this as some kind of triumph, because we know that actually this really is only the tip of the iceberg of the problem as well. We've got way over 1 million illegal migrants in the country that we need to start finding and removing, and if we're working on these numbers, it's going to take decades to get rid of.
Well, Labour do claim that forced removals, even allowing for your numbers, are still up on what they were when they came to office. Is that true?
That is true. That is true. They're still by sort of what it was in the mid-teens, a lot lower. And, you know, basically that is because that last Conservative government effectively gave up trying to do anything meaningful on border control and just allowed the situation to peter out. So I don't think really comparing yourself to what the Conservatives managed to do is a particularly high bar.
I was going to say, that's not the that's
exactly.
not a great example. And of course there are people, you know, we don't see the stories, but people get deported all the time. We just don't really see it. There's always a number, regardless of who's in power. It's the same in the States, isn't it? I'm fascinated by that kind of battle of who. I remember Trump, and by those guys, you know, under my watch I will deport 350,000 people in my turn. It's like, yeah, but that's the number on average that get deported anyway, whoever's in.
Well, exactly. It's basically who can shout the number the loudest,
shout the number the loudest,
with the most glitz and glamour that gets the kind of credit. And, you know, unmoored from any context, it might seem impressive, but really this number actually, especially when you consider the caveats I just mentioned, is incredibly underwhelming.
Why is it so hard? I mean, I know this is the sort of $64,000 question, but you might think if you've got people that are not meant to be in the country, or you've got people who've come illegally into the country. I know that word illegally is debated because, of course, if you've come over on a boat and you claim asylum, you cease to be illegal, technically speaking. But it's never... It's not widely seen in that way. People still see that as an illegal entry into the UK.
Yeah, so with the asylum system, obviously, if they've claimed asylum, they've landed in the UK and they said, I claim asylum, you have to sort of process the whole case. So that obviously inevitably slows that process down. But even then, when it's been decided that they're not a legitimate asylum seeker, there are so many human rights appeals that can be made, and the ECHR is clearly a big problem in the Human Rights Act, but also just the sheer... apparatus of the judicial review process in this country is being increasingly utilised. I think it's about 70% of judicial reviews in this country are actually of individuals that are eligible for removal. So there's a whole sort of ecosystem that has emerged around our courts, especially immigration tribunals as well. And you've got left-wing lawyers, often taxpayer-funded as well, that know how to game the system. And it really gums up the whole process. And this is why actually we have seen an increase in just throwing money at individuals hoping they will leave rather than trying to fight and deport them.
So this number, 60,000, as we just established, devil is in the detail. What's it likely to look like a year from now?
I think probably, given it has been petering up slowly, I think we'll probably still be between 9,000 and 10,000 deportations. I think best case scenario we'll see 9,500 deportations, which again, just for context, you know, we were seeing sort of 20,000 in the early 2010s, so we're still way below that. But I don't think we're going to see anything transformative, and especially when you consider that actually a lot of those that have been deported in this last year are the low-hanging fruit, quote unquote, and not actually those problematic individuals.
I was going to say, and you know, many people understandably, many voters will go, hang on a second, there's hundreds of thousands of people here that shouldn't be here. Look at all of those hotels. What's going on? Surely you just go to the hotel and go, look, there's a load of people shouldn't have come in that into the country in that way. They should be deported. But no government is able to really do that. You know, I wonder when, you know, if Reform UK were to get into power in 2029, are they really going to be able to change that?
So a big thing that I think does need to happen is we need to go back to sort of what Theresa May was getting at in 2017, you know, this creation of a hostile environment where actually if you are here illegally, it's incredibly difficult for you to function in society. It's hard to get a job, it's hard to find anywhere to rent, you can't access sort of basic services. And I think actually what you will see there is a lot of individuals choose to take themselves out of the country just because it becomes so difficult to live here. But in terms of rounding up, immigration enforcement is woefully underfunded in this country when you compare comparatively to the United States, so that needs a lot more money as well.
Indeed. Robert, great to see you. Thank you very much. Robert Bates with us on the programme, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. We are, of course, talking about that story that the Home Office making a big claim here. 60,000 unauthorised migrants and convicted criminals have been removed or deported, but the devil is in the detail. So the figures aren't necessarily quite as advantageous to the government's line of we are strict on this stuff as you might first think. Let's get a word from Ivan Sampson, Head of Immigration, Privates Law. Ivan, always good to have you on with us. I mean, are you one of those lefty lawyers that we've just been referring to?
No, and I'm not taking a single penny from legal aid for any services that I provide to my clients.
And I ask you the question because I know that is the answer, and I'm always happy for you to make that case when you come on with us. So listen, when you see that figure, it's the same question I asked Robert, really. 60,000 unauthorised migrants have been deported. What do you make of that headline?
Well, I never thought I'd agree with the directors of Centre for Migration, but I do. What he said made absolute sense. What he didn't say was, how do we solve the problem? He didn't give any solutions to that.
Yeah.
And we have 1 million people who are illegally in the UK. The boats are a fraction of the people that are here illegally.
Sure.
About 4%, something like that. So I think the problem is that even if we remove, let's say we remove 20,000 people a year, okay, it would take 50 years to remove them. Logistically, that's impossible. So something needs to be done. And I'm probably going to get a lot of hate mail when I say this, but you know what? There's only one solution. We have to offer an amnesty. But before we do that, we've got to correct and reform the system. Because as we're removing people, guess what? People are still coming in. Take a simple thing like monitoring somebody coming into the country. We don't even do that. So if somebody comes in for 6 months, we have no idea when they leave. There's no monitoring of exits. Simple thing to do, something that we used to do and the government stopped for whatever reason. And so we've got to not only just remove people, but deal with the people coming across. We need to deal with the boat crossings. I mean, how many of these 60,000 were people who entered the country across the channel? A handful. So we need to secure our borders. How do we do that? The EU wants something in return for preventing people getting on the boats. And no one's talking about it. And what they want is some form of free movement. And I'll be honest with you, I'd rather have people with similar cultures to us coming over to the UK than those who don't have our values.
That shouldn't be a contentious point, should it? I mean,
it shouldn't.
I know it's built into one, and of course that line is kind of hijacked and taken by people, perhaps predominantly on the left, and they run with that baton and say, "No, you're all racist if you think that." I mean, you speak as a lawyer, you speak as a non-white man, you speak of a man that's got your own cultural background, but you are, I think most people would say, speaking common sense here, Ivan.
You're the first person to describe me as non-white. I am British. That's what I am.
Yeah.
And I love and value the values of our country. So, no, absolutely. And this is the thing. Who replaced the European nationals who left? Who replaced them? So migrants from countries who don't share our values. And that was never thought through. We left the EU so quickly in a rush, we didn't really think it through.
And it's interesting, just to qualify that point about referring to you as non-white, it was within the context, obviously, of pointing out that you don't have to be white to have that view, if that makes sense.
It's about your moral compass. It's about your character. And that's what's important. It doesn't matter about the colour of your skin. It's about whether you share our British...
But it's that argument, it's made into that, isn't it?
Yes,
by people who want to say, actually, if you've got a firm and a robust view on immigration, you're probably a little bit racist in there.
Yeah. So, look, it needs to be met. And what I don't understand about the Home Office, why don't they just get on with it? Monitor people getting into the country. What is the delay? Why are we not thinking about an amnesty? We did it before. We did it in 2004. And it worked really well.
Can you remember or recall how many people that was for, Ivan?
I do remember the policy, which was that if you had, excuse me, a child who'd been in the country for 7 years at the time, you could get an amnesty. And it was very successful, and those individuals are now paying taxes, assimilated into the system. Look, I'm not saying that we should grant leave for people with criminal records, with a dubious identity, but the thing is, we've got to weed these people out. We've got to really, the people who have been here, some of them for decades, what do we do with them? We can't just continue avoiding the subject and just letting them be. That's not right. I mean, okay,
I get the tax thing, but that's not necessarily, I mean, the million people that are here illegally, maybe they might claim they are contributing in other ways. Are you saying they all lurk in the kind of dark economy in some respect?
Indeed. I mean, a lot of them will be trafficked. It happens. Some of them would have entered and not gone back. And most of them will be from the Asian and subcontinent and Africa. Most of these people, that's where they're coming from. Because what they do is they work and send money home. Even on low wages, that's a lot more that their relatives are receiving than they would if they were working in their home countries. So look, I'm not blaming these people. Human nature being what it is, people are going to do that. The responsibility of the government is to have measures in place so people can't do it. So stop pointing fingers at asylum seekers, stop pointing fingers at migrants. People, nature, human nature, I'm afraid that's what's going to happen. We've got to have strong, robust, enforceable laws that work, that catch and remove people. And once we do that, I think we can address the problem.
It would, the amnesty idea would, for some people, it would be not the right thing, but for those that would notionally support it, it would have to come with a more robust immigration policy as well, right? That would have to be part of it, because otherwise you just end up with another amnesty in 10 years' time.
Look, in 25 years, let's say 25 years, we've got all these people, we're removing people. Guess what? We're going to be left with more people in 25 years' time if we don't change the system. We'll be just chasing our tail. So the first is to have a revamp of the Home Office, a total revamp. The managers need to go. The ones who've been running the system. We need new people, fresh blood, new way of thinking. And take UAE, good example. As long as you work, you stay. The day that you stop working, guess what happens to you?
You go.
No, you don't go. you pay a daily fine of about £50 a day.
Wow.
Okay, and if you don't pay the fine, guess what happens? They pick you up and they deport you.
And then you go. Got it. Ivan, great conversation as well. Thank you. Nice to explore those angles too. Ivan Sampson, Head of Immigration at Privitas Law. Thank you to him. 0344 499 1000. We'll take your comments on everything you've heard there, and also from Robert Bates as well. And also your calls, as we've been discussing, on the Labour leadership. What is going on there? Michael's in Birmingham. What do you got for us, Michael? Afternoon to you.
I'm just in my head.
You've got a great line. Who are you with? Because I want to transfer to those guys. We will get you back on a better line. That was proper Doctor Who territory, wasn't it? 19 minutes after 2, some breaking news. The serial killer Steve Wright has been jailed for life with a minimum of 40 years at the Old Bailey for the 1999 murder of 17-year-old Victoria Hall. This is a man, of course, an absolute horrendous piece of work, already serving a whole life sentence for the murders of 5 women. This was in Ipswich, if you remember, the Ipswich area in 2006. So the sentence is given. It will make no difference to the amount of time he will serve. He's already on a whole life term, but been jailed for an additional notionally 40 years, minimum of 40 years, for the murder of 17-year-old Victoria Hall. Let's go back to the calls. Michael, I think we've got you back on a better line. How you doing?
Yeah, can you hear me okay now?
Loud and clear, yeah. You went proper Dalek on us then.
Oh, great. Yeah, well, that was me exploding at that guy talking about an amnesty for illegal migrants.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just off the scale. You know, what else do we have an amnesty for? Murder? If you stay away for long? No, I'm not.
Well, his argument was that we're not going to get rid of 1 million people. It's not going to happen. So we might as well get them into work and collect taxes from them.
No, that's rewarding illegality, and frankly, look, I don't buy that in any way, shape, or form. They've won if they've done that. But where he was half right is get the systems right and just try and get rid of people. Try better than they do now. But I wanted to talk about the Labour thing.
Yeah, the leadership thing. Who's going to get the big gig if Keir Starmer walks the plank?
Well, I don't like this idea, the kind of normalisation of, you know, people go around calling Raina, and you've got to say that with suitable contempt. Raina, calling her, you know, Ange, like she's Madge Madonna or something like that. You know, I mean, let's just get it right. Raina has got a checkered personal and professional history.
Yeah.
So, frankly, I would be very glad if they got her, because a proper educated person like Kemi Badenoch and even Nigel Farage, who, by the way, I wish Kemi Badenoch would defect to reform, but would be able to dissect Raina and Ethiopia and whatever. She is just a complete and utter embarrassment. I mean, I'm a man in the street, and I could run rings round her intellectually, because I know one thing, I know how to pay my tax, and I know what my address is.
And that's not too much to ask, is it, really? Michael, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. Couple of comments on the collective noun for lefties. A dependency of lefties. I like that, says John Ross. Brad in Cambridge, what about a corruption of lefties? Andy says, Larry the cat for leader. Yeah, is he still there, that cat? That manky old beast. Is it still knocking around down? I think it is. David says, I think the owner of your mystery voice should replace Starmer. Don't know who it is, but they're bound to be better, which is a fair point. And Paul Jones, when we had Boris as Prime Minister, he was funny and entertaining, so Labour should have Lammy as Prime Minister. That would be hilarious. We might as well all have a laugh as the country goes down the drain. More calls from you. Who, if Starmer went, should replace him? And come at that, if you would, from a perspective as a Conservative voter or a Reform voter. Which figure in the Labour Party would do you the most favours if they took over from Keir Starmer? 0344 499 1000, 22 minutes after 2. This is Talk.
I mean, the man... Hello and welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
That's Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Suits. That's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beers, and I feel...
Raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of its desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
25 past 2. Back to your call. Steve is in Durham. What do you got, Steve? Who's going to replace Big Keir when he goes?
Oh, I'll tell you what, well, I think first of all, there's a real big problem with trust of all politicians, and I've always said it. I've been for a long time, all my life, a Labour voter. I can't bring myself to vote Labour. I definitely can't bring myself to vote Conservative. I can't get away with reform as at the moment, but they're probably the closest to the pen will go.
Why?
Anyway,
why not conservative in there, Steve?
I just.
Is it the dreaded C word that is completely alien and enemy territory as a lifelong Labour voter?
Pretty much, yes. I mean, I lived through the Thatcher years, you know, and
they were the good years.
This time, they were good years if you were if you had money. If they were good years, if you were fairly prosperous. But I don't know. I think maybe it's just the way I was brought up. We weren't particularly a political family.
I get it.
We all worked, you know. But it's just the way I've been brought up.
Sure. But it's interesting, though, isn't it, that reform can attract people from... I know a few reform voters, and in fact, one guy who stood as a reform candidate who was a lifelong Labour voter. He was of the kind of Tony Benn, Dennis Skinner school of Labour.
Yeah, okay, I get that. Like I said, the closest place, I'm quite close to reform at the moment. The problem I've got with them is the Farage. It's going to be another Boris Johnson populist vote, and something's going to happen. And that's the point I was going to make, is that as soon as if a politician came up, if something happened and a politician said, right, that was my bad, and they did it straight away, and then I apologise for that, that was my bad, that was an error of judgment, people would trust them. But they end up getting forced to do things like Starmer did yesterday when he made this, I don't think it was a genuine apology. He tried to make it sincere, but it didn't come across like that. It came across like it was very forced. His political advisors had said, right, this is what you need to say, but I just don't trust him. I've had conversations with MPs before, outside fish and chip shops and things like that when I've bumped into them, and I said, you know, people in general don't trust politicians. As soon as a politician something happens, then what will happen is that they'll go quiet, they'll try and blame their advisors, they'll try and blame the opposition, they'll try and blame somebody else, anyone but themselves. All they have to do is say, yep, that was me. You look at the criminal system, for example.
Yeah.
A criminal, somebody murders somebody. You've got somebody said, yep, I murdered them. They get a slightly lighter sentence. You know, they get, well, maybe not murder because you get light, but, you know, a lesser crime. And they'll get a more lean sentence. And because they held their hands up, said, yep, that was me, and they did it straight away. You know, so why politicians are the same? No, the problem is nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm doing. You're not perfect. Everyone,
especially Steve, in the world we're currently in, where everybody has a voice and a platform through social media, and you know there are some people who have substantial voices. They might not even be professional presenters or journalists or famous people, but they've got big followers because they've developed it, and that becomes so you have all these almost new emerging kind of mini channels out there that are keeping all of these discussions live. So stuff that wouldn't previously have really touched the sides finds itself, we are constantly debating the ineptitude of our politicians. So are we ever going to find a good one?
Well, probably not. There's always something going to be lurking in the background, and a politician, everybody's accountable for their own actions, and politicians are no different. I'm no different, and you know, I think I've just come up with an idea of who would make a really good prime minister.
Go on.
And that's Doctor Who, because something comes out the woodwork, he could just dip into his TARDIS, go and put it right, and then it never happened.
Yeah.
And that's
well, who was your favourite Doctor, Steve?
Oh, Tom Baker.
Yeah, with you 100% on that. Clearly similar eras. Steve, great call. Lovely to speak. Thank you very much indeed for that. Let's go to Matt in Cheshire. What have you got, Matt?
Hi, good afternoon, Ian.
Hiya.
I was calling about Angela Rayner and the myth of Angela Rayner being competent and just like Andy Burnham.
Correct, yes.
This constant talk in the media by people who haven't got a clue what they're talking about how great these people are. I live 2 miles away from her constituency. I went to college in a constituency, And I used to go out there when I was a young lad, and it was a beautiful, vibrant, attractive town that people came from all over the northwest to have a night out, and you could go shopping, and it was a great place. It's now an immigrant-infested cesspit with drunks all over it and drug addicts, and it looks like the bottom of the barrel. And that's what Labour do. That's what Andy Burnham does. That's what Angela Rayner does. So the idea that any of them are going to do anything dissimilar to what the absolute abomination Starmer has done is laughable.
You don't, yeah. Well, I would agree with you on quite a lot there. The point you made about the myth of Angela Rayner, I'm always happy to have that particular myth punctured on a regular basis, because it's also insulting to working class people and to women. The idea that, because she doesn't speak posh and she's a bit kind of her vowels are a bit rough around the edges and she's a northern lass and was a single mother, therefore she must be good, which is a nonsense.
Yes. She's the Liam Gallagher of politics. She basically gets away with waddling around, having a bit of a town. And on what that gentleman just said, the best people walk away from politics, Ian, because they're not sycophantic party line type people, that they think for themselves. They don't just sort of climb the greasy pole and agree with everybody. I was about to get involved myself a few months ago, and I'm now not bothering because reform has sort of dumped on me.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
They don't know anything about my area. Hundreds of people have said they will vote for me, and then they're going to parachute someone in who probably isn't from round here, and you just think, are they already becoming the same as I said previously?
Yeah, I get it. Matt, thank you very much indeed. It is frustrating, and of course not every party ticks every box at the same time. So Matt, who's wanting to sort of stand for reform, doesn't seem to be getting any kind of traction in that respect. Matthew in Cheltenham says, let's hope Ed the Nut Zero Millipede becomes the next Prime Minister. This will take the votes away from the loony left Green Party and give reform a landslide. Yes, it will, although would those votes ever go to reform anyway? Are they votes that would have got, or the Tories for that matter? It's kind of weird how people vote. I mean, you've got to remember, Keir Starmer might have got in with a share less than Jeremy Corbyn got in with, but he still won and he's got a sizable majority. And you look at that and think, OK, people voted because they had the hump with the Tories. But why would you go Keir Starmer? But what was it that you were seeing in the Labour kind of offering that was so attractive? Lines are open, 87222 if you are messaging. It's 25 to 3. This is Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Thank you to Nick on Hailing Island, who says your caller Michael was a legend man on the street. Pure common sense. Bravo. Always happy to impart nice words about our callers. And Don in Chelmsford says your lawyer guest Ivan is advocating an amnesty for illegal migrants, which is an admission of failure. Plus his enforcement suggestion looks like ice. Wow. Yeah, it's difficult to kind of get your head around that. His point was that you're never going to remove 1 million people who are in this country illegally. Now, he speaks as a man who's the son of migrants and what would typically be called a left-wing lawyer because he's an immigration lawyer. He refutes that title, by the way. And he's saying, well, make it happen because you're not ever going to solve the problem and then you get strict on immigration. But if you didn't get strict on immigration, you just end, like in another 10 years, you come and go, here's another 1 million people. We have another amnesty. I'm merely putting that out there. How would that work to you? Let's get a moment to talk about this as well, which we touched on, or I mentioned it at the very beginning. The NHS Hospital Trust, who's recruited a nurse to support families where parents are close relatives. So this would be, if you like, typically cousin marriage. Bradford Teaching Hospital's NHS Foundation Trust advertised for the position for a close relative marriage neonatal nurse or midwife. Are the NHS now openly supporting cousin marriage? Let's get a word from Iram Ramzan, who's a writer on Middle Eastern and Muslim social issues. Iram, nice to have you with us. Good to see you. I mean, this one crops up from time to time, of course. I mean, I suppose we are largely talking about within the Muslim community, but not exclusively, as I understand it. Cousin marriage, I mean, we can talk about the title being close relative marriage, but I think ultimately that's what this refers to. What is the current, I don't want to say state of play, that sounds like the inaccurate way to describe it, but how prolific is cousin marriage? Let's put it that way.
Well, thank you so much for having me on today.
Pleasure.
Well, it depends where you're talking. If you're talking about where the majority of the people come from. So a lot of people here trace their roots back to Pakistan or Pakistan-administered Kashmir. And the rate there is at least 60%. So marriages will be between first cousins and second cousins. And so, of course, when people migrated here, they continued some of those practices. So in areas like Bradford and other towns with a similar demographic, you'll find that people did continue sort of marrying their cousins, whether here or from abroad. And when I researched on this a couple of years ago, I spoke to people in Bradford, and it was found that actually the rate had dropped. So before it was about 62%, if I'm not mistaken, who were marrying their first or second cousins. And in 10 years, that rate had dropped to about 46%, which is quite a sharp drop. But yes, it's still quite high.
So is there a kind of an age thing related to this, that, you know, the elders might have had one view, but as kids have grown up and they've had kids, they've refined their views on this?
Yeah, so, you know, for example, in my family, it was definitely the norm a generation ago. But when I speak to my cousins about it, they just find it really weird because they were born and brought up here. So like other British people, they find it a very strange practice.
So it's a kind of South Asian legacy in many respects.
Yes, but fortunately, as I pointed out, the rate is falling. And so when I spoke to people in Bradford, you know, some were very surprised that it still continues. You know, I remember speaking to one young man who said, "Oh, that still happens. I thought it was just our grandparents who did that." And, you know, again, similar comments from other people about their age. So people in their 20s, early 30s.
But it is still happening, and, you know, it does sort of divide the room somewhat. Obviously, some people have a view that it's cultural and therefore it should be allowed to continue. Others essentially will argue it's just very dangerous because there are potentially some awful health implications to this.
Yes, of course. So, the risk doubles from like 3 to 6%, for children if they're born to parents who are closely related. It might not sound that high, but then if this is happening within over multiple generations, then that problem gets only worse. And we've seen countless examples of children who will be born with debilitating illnesses, blindness, other physical impairments, and they'll be stuck with those conditions for the rest of their lives.
So should it be outlawed then?
Well, I think it should have been banned years ago, if I'm honest with you. I don't know in reality how exactly it would be implemented, because first of all, would you require people to provide proof whenever they're getting married that this person is not related? And what if they married somebody from abroad? How can you prove they're not related to you? Or if they do a Muslim only marriage, and they're not registered, what if they then do it that way? How can you then enforce it?
Yeah.
So I think in theory, yes, I don't think it should continue. And it should have been banned many years ago. But how you would actually legislate for that, I'm not sure.
You write on Muslim social issues. You just talking about this just spiked a thought in my head in terms of, you talked about younger generations changing their views on things. What other areas do you sense that is affecting? Do many young Muslims marry outside of the faith? Are there more of those doing that, or is that too taboo for some groups and families? What's the story there?
Yeah, I think marrying outside is definitely still a taboo, especially for women. Muslim women aren't allowed to marry non-Muslim men. So that does lead to a lot of problems. Unless the man converts, then it's fine. But what you usually see now is a lot of people, because they were born and brought up here, they know their rights. They don't want to just marry somebody from their parents' village. They will choose their own partner, and it could be, someone who's similar. Maybe if it's a Pakistani origin person, they might find another Pakistani person to marry, or they might just go down a completely different route and marry somebody who's of a different culture and background. I have a relative who's getting married soon, and she's marrying a Moroccan guy. So I'm seeing more and more instances of people who are definitely marrying outside their immediate kind of social group, because
but
people
not
have
outside,
no choice.
But not outside their faith.
I would need to look into the statistics and see just how many of those marriages will be, but I would say the vast majority will probably be Muslims marrying other Muslims.
Yeah. Just give us a perspective, and again, this is a conversation neither of us expected to have, but I think it's genuinely interesting and something I'm pretty sure as a young journalist and writer that you probably consider this. You will hear, and I have a sympathy for anyone in this situation. When something happens, the obvious thing is a terror attack, and you probably wake up thinking, oh God, please don't let it be another Muslim name or whatever, because we're going to have to go through the same arguments and the same thing again. No, it wasn't me, it wasn't in my name, it wasn't in the name of my God. These are people who've taken a faith and done something else with it. What is your overarching view of cultural assimilation? Because that seems to be really central. I also happen to think, and we had an immigration lawyer on earlier who made this point, that cultural similarities are kind of important in a society for it to rub along. And of course, Islam isn't the only faith that we could have this conversation about, but it is a big and a growing faith in this country. What is your sense of that? Because it is an argument that comes up a lot. I'm sure you've probably even written about it, and certainly it's a discussion point for Muslims and non-Muslims about where we're at on that one, because the arguments seem to be, and I'm removing the kind of hard right arguments on this, but just moderate voices seem to say that there is, in some respects, a bit of a rub here in cultures where there's a clash. Is that fair?
Oh wow, we've moved on from Muslim marriages. Well, it depends what you mean by assimilation. I think if you're expecting people to completely give up everything from their countries of origin. I don't think that's very realistic. I think wherever you go, people will cling on to something, whether it's language, whether it's food, maybe the way they dress. And I think there has to be a balance. When in Rome, do as the Romans. I don't think there's anything wrong with keeping hold on to certain practices from your culture, providing that, you're not imposing that on anybody. And it's not clashing with the law as well. So if it's not illegal, I don't see the major problem. But I think the problem is also because when you have people coming over to this country, we should have had some sort of system in place where we could help them integrate into British life, whether that was maybe English lessons or classes to teach them about British values, British history, British culture. And I think the state has shares some of the responsibility for this, allowing people to come over, but then just leaving them to their own devices. How else are they supposed to know how to behave in a new country?
So you end up with a kind of almost a ghettoized situation in some areas. And I think Panorama years ago did I think it might have been in Blackburn, where they visited a town that was very divided between Muslim and non-Muslim. It wasn't a problem, but there was no mixing, really. So no one was beating each other up. Everything went fine and swimmingly. And they went back sort of 10 or 15 years later to see what it looked like, and it was exactly the same. And they had kind of, one of the elders from the Muslim side and one of the elders from the non-Muslim side, and they were, breaking bread and having a chat about it. No one hated each other, but simultaneously they didn't have anything in common either. So I don't know where we go with that. Is that do we just accept that in the 21st century we have different compartmentalised groups that live in certain places? Do we leave it at that, or do we encourage more cohesion? Because it does the only reason I raise it is because the cousin marriage issue is one that gets absolutely jumped on by the right, who will another good example why Muslims should not be here because everything about their way of life is very different. So, which is why I'm keen to just kind of look at the wider issue of assimilation, because it does all feed in, I guess, to a central narrative here.
I think. I think you raise an important point about people living in their own silos and communities. And I think the solution to that is to get people mixing from a much younger age. So instead of, I know you have multiple interfaith groups and all these initiatives where people come together, but, I think by then it's far too late. And you should have people mixing, from childhood. So not allow primary schools where it's just monocultural, have children growing up together, learning from each other. And then, by the time they're teenagers or adults, they don't really see many differences between them, and they learn from each other as well.
So what do you, when you see somebody post on social media, and you see this all the time, I saw it something similar this morning or yesterday evening, where somebody had put, look, don't care what anybody says, Islam is just completely incompatible with the West. Now, you would arguably find that offensive. Well, maybe you don't care, it's water off a duck's back. What is your immediate answer to that? And then they go on to list reasons like cousin marriage, Sharia law, people getting animated because a kid kicked a Quran in the playground or something. Those kind of examples. What is your response?
I think, I understand people's concerns, but as I said, this is also a failure from our governments, current one, the previous ones, our authorities. You can't you can't allow people to just be left to their own devices, especially when they're from many different backgrounds. I think that's one of the great things about this country. We do have so many different people living here, and I think on the whole they do get on. But then there are too many instances where you have clashes between, let's say, maybe racists, or you have more religious fundamentalists who want to impose their views on people. And the problem is they're just given too much attention. People are scared to stand up to them as well. And, the authorities fail to do anything about it.
Okay.
And in terms of cousin marriages, I mean, it's not exactly, I wouldn't say it's strictly a Muslim practice. I mean, the religion doesn't explicitly promote it, but it doesn't ban it either. So I just want to point that out.
No, fair point. Iram, thank you very much. Nice to have you on with us. We will speak again, I'm sure. Iram Ramzan, who is a writer on Middle East and Muslim social issues. Thank you to her. Over to you. We'll talk to Stephen in just a second in Birmingham. 0344 499 1000.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCown.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Sinks, that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beard, and I feel
Raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of its desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, coming up on 5 to 2. Just before we talk to Robert in the Wirral, Voice of Doom, day 12. Wow. Day 12, it's, for those who don't know where you've been, by the way, it's a mystery voice, the mystery voice, but it's political. Left wing, right wing, young, old, dead or alive. Who is this?
This is your chance.
If you think you know, 87222, here it is again.
This is your chance.
And again.
This is your chance.
87222. If we get a correct answer, we will tell you who it is after the headlines at 3 o'clock. If we don't, it rolls over to Monday. One more time.
This is your chance.
87222. Robert, how are you doing?
Good afternoon, Ian. Thanks for taking the call.
It's a pleasure, mate. On Mixing Cultures, this one.
Mixing cultures. I was very interested listening to your conversation with the young Muslim lady there.
Yeah.
I was wondering whether or not you have seen or can recall the interview between David Frost and Muhammad Ali, probably around in the late 80s, I would think, when this very issue was the topic of conversation. And Muhammad Ali was very clear that there can be no mixing of the cultures, and
wow.
the teachings of Elijah Muhammad, of whom he was a follower, forbade it, because as Muhammad Ali said, the bluebirds don't mix with the redbirds, the pigeons don't mix with the buzzards, and he don't want to see no blue-eyed, blonde, curly-haired member of any of his nation's family. And he was very clear, and I'm sure that you'll agree that Muhammad Ali was a great man, a great sportsman, a devout Muslim, and he spoke for a lot of people, and a lot of people continue to follow his
Well, that's where it gets interesting, isn't it? Because I think he's perfectly entitled to that view, and I'm sure you do too, Robert, because that's
absolutely do.
That's his view of his culture, his people, his religion. I get that. Now, if you said that out loud, you'd be in a bit of trouble, probably.
I'd be in the next cell to the lady who was just released from Southport.
You might well be. And that's what's interesting. Now, the question then is, let's say we get to a point where you are allowed to say that. You're allowed to go, actually, yeah, black people, brown people, white people, whatever the case. Everyone's allowed to say, you know, we stay within our own because we want to continue our culture. We want that to thrive and grow as we go through the years. But then you get into assimilating together. Where does that leave us all?
Well, that is the difficult part, is it? Because cultures, it's very difficult to see how some cultures can mix. Having said that, when Muhammad Ali said that, sat opposite David Frost, did that make him a racist? I don't know.
It's a good point. I'm going to look that up and watch that. I remember Muhammad Ali appearing on Parkinson quite a lot back in the day.
No, this was David.
But this was David Frost. Yeah, no, well, Frost was great at those kind of sort of slightly more in-depth one-to-ones, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And this was in a boxing ring, and it was very, very insightful to see the deep thoughts and followings that Muhammad Ali espoused at that time,
sure.
And whether or not they are still relevant today, I don't know, but they were his words.
I'm going to look it up, Robert. That's a great call, great recommendation as well. Thank you, Robert, in the Wirral. We can just talk to Stephen in Birmingham now. We've not got long, Stephen, but I'm sure you can do it. Back to that issue of Keir Starmer and co. What are you thinking?
I'll tell you what, mate. Thanks for having me on, but
pleasure. What
I'd like to say is one question for Keir Starmer regarding Mandelson is this, and that is if you was to meet Nigel Farage, right, and Nigel Farage was to say to him, right, if I had done the same mistake, what would you be saying to me? You would want me to resign.
Yeah. You'd want him buried as well as wanting him to resign.
But, you know, the way we all think now, he knows he's wrong. He thinks he can just get away with it. He thinks he can just get over it. He can't get over it. And the other thing with stopping the boats, there's one way to stop the boats. And I think you should go the Hungary way, right? Hungary and Poland, and that is just pay the fine. It'll be a lot cheaper than what we're paying out now.
Well, I mean, people are mulling that one over as well. Stephen, great call. You did it in time as well. Thank you very much indeed for that. Dave says the collective noun for left is a crapful. Yeah, it kind of works. Straight to the point. Lots to get through in the next hour as well. And, of course, we may have a winner of Day 12 on The Voice of Doom, the political mystery voice. Have another listen.
This is your chance.
If you think you know who that is, 87222. 87222. If we get a winner, we'll tell you in the next section. Stand by for all of that. And, of course, you can call us on 0344 499 1000. Right now, it's 3 o'clock. Let's get the latest news headlines.
the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the home of common sense. We've been discussing Keir Starmer, leadership issues around the Labour Party. If Keir Starmer walks the plank, who should replace him as Labour leader? Now, if you're not a Labour supporter, you might say, well, I don't care, frankly. But, of course, you should. If you're a Conservative voter or a Reform voter, what is most or who would be most advantageous to you to see leading the Labour Party? It's an open question. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about the BBC in just a second. They've just announced, of course, their TV licence will once again increase from £174.50 to £180. Your thoughts on that? And as we discussed in the last hour, an NHS trust has recruited a nurse to support families where parents are close relatives. This is Bradford Teaching Hospital's NHS Foundation Trust, who advertised a position for a close relative marriage neonatal nurse or midwife. Thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000. And of course, you can message 87222. We'll bring you the voice of doom. Have we got a winner? Find out shortly. But first, let's have a little look at that TV licence rise. I think many will argue, well, it's been frozen for a little while. I can't quite remember the last time it went up, but it's still £180 in a very, very competitive digital space now. And that, of course, has always been the game-changing element of this argument. Can you any longer defend a BBC licence fee when you have the choice of things like Netflix, Amazon, Apple, and of course Disney was the other, and there are others on top of that. Let's speak with John Whittingdale MP, Conservative MP for Malden, but of course more prevalently to this conversation, ex-Culture Secretary as well. John, good to see you. Nice to have you with us. How often did the old TV licence debate come across the desks down there at the Culture Department when you were in office?
Oh, I mean, very regularly. And before that, I chaired the Select Committee and we had long debates about it. So you're not actually quite right. I mean, it actually went up last year.
Okay. Was it last year that was the first time in a while?
It was frozen for a while.
That's it.
And then there was quite a large increase, and now obviously it's going up again. But my concern is that the real challenge to the BBC is not just the people who should pay and don't pay, but that number has actually doubled already, the evasion rate. But on top of that, there are more and more people who are turning around and saying, we are already paying for services we do want, like the ones you mentioned from Netflix or Amazon or Disney or any of the others, and we don't see why we need to pay on top of that a compulsory licence fee when we don't use the BBC. So last year, 300,000 people said they were no longer going to pay. And of course, if the licence fee is going up again, the chances are that that number will continue to rise. So the BBC actually may well lose income because it is forcing more and more people to drop out.
So is this down now to, again, as I said, John, at the beginning, the arguments, I think the arguments certainly in the past that I would have advanced in support of the TV licence were largely almost romantic ones, remember Saturday night with Parkinson and Starsky and Hutch and all of that kind of stuff. It was like a comfy pair of slippers, and that's how we remembered it. The family sitting around watching the TV. There were, a few channels available, but only a few channels, and the BBC did what it did. But, of course, those arguments are long gone, so to construct an intelligent argument around it now is pretty tough.
I mean, the BBC still broadcasts hugely popular programmes, Traitors, for instance, being the most recent, or The Night Manager, and then there's all a range of radio, online, etc. But it is in competition in the way that it never was previously with all the streaming services. And it's for that reason that people are saying, well, £180 compulsory is a lot of money, and I don't need to necessarily view the BBC, because the most watched channel actually now is YouTube.
Yeah.
And you can get a lot of broadcast programmes on demand through YouTube. And of course, if you do that, then you're outside the requirement of paying a licence fee.
Yeah. Indeed. What have the BBC got to do now? Because there are never-ending discussions about making themselves fit for purpose and trying to do things that would be attractive to a younger generation. They're doing that sort of through their podcast arm, etc. Attempting to save money in different departments. It still looks absolutely, I mean, huge to me in terms of what they offer. But what is their... I mean, if you were advising them right now, John, what would be number one on the to-do list for the BBC?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a matter for the BBC now, because we are in the preparation stage for the next charter. So it is the government that has to lay down the charter which will govern what the BBC does for the next 10 years. I did the charter last time, back in 2016. This time, the government has produced a green paper giving a whole range of options, but actually they're options none of which are really feasible. And the first question, which I think needs to be asked, which the government appear not to be asking, is, well, what does the BBC need to do, and what actually perhaps does it no longer need to do? The BBC originally provided a huge range because there wasn't any alternative. Now, with all these other services, there is a case to question whether or not the BBC needs, for instance, 4 mainstream TV channels plus a few more specialist ones, plus all its radio stations, and could the BBC actually provide the stuff it needs to do with less? And you observed, the BBC is a huge organisation. So I think the first question is, could the BBC be cut back and concentrate on the stuff which it is very important that it continues to provide?
And would that be, ultimately that seems to be the inevitable upshot of all of this, isn't it? It's got to streamline itself. It's got to become relevant and exceptional within the areas it chooses to focus on. And one would assume that if it still retains the licence fee model, that fee would have to come down as well.
Well, I think the licence fee model is reaching the end of its life. As I say, it is more and more people are turning away from it. Now, I think there is a case in due course when you could make part of what the BBC provides subject to some kind of subscription model, but we're not there yet. The technology doesn't allow it. The government talked about advertising, but if advertising were introduced on the BBC, it would essentially destroy the commercial competitors who do rely completely on advertising. So I don't think there's an easy way out of that, which is why I think we need to look at what the BBC does first, and then see if maybe the compulsory element of a licence fee need not be anything like the level it is at the moment.
Which sounds fair enough. John, great to have you on, sir. Thank you very much indeed. John Whittingdale MP. He is, of course, the former Culture Secretary as well. I think when you look at their radio, is it Radio 1 that's got like about half a dozen offshoots of it as well? It might not be quite half a dozen, but it's got a whole load of them. Radio 2 has a load of them as well. And at the time when that happened, lots of people in the commercial sector were going, hang on, this is just not fair. This is the state are hoovering up additional... they don't need to do it. Of course, the BBC will say, well, if we don't do it, we're not responding to changing appetites and needs, so we do have to do it. I think the radio area, and I've worked for them in the radio area, is kind of almost a classic example of where you genuinely could go in and say, look, that's really got to go, that bit, or that bit, or that bit of it. You can keep this, your ones, your twos, and your fours, but everything else, it's got to. What's Radio 3 for God's sake? Seriously, what is Radio 3 for? Back in the day, I think it used to be kind of a classical music station. And then that really got overtaken by Classic FM, which has done just incredible work and found a niche in a market where nobody will be able to do it like the BBC. And they did it, and they did it better. Much in the same way that Sky Sports took the sports, when people said, oh, you're giving sports to Sky. Really? What, they're going to do it better than the BBC? Yep, and they kind of do, and they managed to excel at that. And now, of course, other TNT and others are in on the game. So, and look, different organisations will provide things that visually or in audio terms different people prefer. So some people quite like the idea that it, you know, Des Lynam sitting there doing Match of the Day or Football Focus when that was going, or any of those kind of grandstand. That's the word I was looking for. There was something nice about that, but again, that's a kind of romantic notion, isn't it? You know, it was your start to your weekend, because as a kid, if you watched television in the morning on a Saturday, depending on your age group, you were either watching Multicoloured Swap Shop with Noel Edmonds, Saturday Superstore, and I can't remember who all of the presenters, I think Mike Reid might have been in on that one, Going Live, Philip Schofield, Sarah Green, all of these big kind of 3-hour marathon Saturday morning TV shows that were just incredible. And then at the end of that, I think there was a weather forecast, and then that grandstand music kicked in, which was just like, wow. I mean, it felt like genuinely part of our culture. And that ain't that long ago in BBC terms, who've been going for 5,000 years now. But that's all changed, and it's okay that it's changed. But the BBC also needs to change or get its act together in some kind of way. Matthew's in Newport. On this issue, Matthew, what are you making of it all?
Well, I'm obviously pro the BBC. There was an interesting comment made by the last speaker. He said that it can't really move to an advert-based thing because it would destroy the commercial channels. Why would it destroy them? Because it would be so popular.
Well, it would certainly... well, it's so popular because it's been given incredible budgets over the years to make it. So it might peter out later, but initially, if you suddenly said to Coca-Cola and Persil, you know, do you want to sponsor Traitors and Strictly, you would have a queue, and it would be in the millions.
But I know that, but that's just two programmes. So you've got all these people saying, we don't watch BBC, I don't watch the BBC. And then
and then you're right, there is always that.
There's a contradiction, isn't there? So
well,
anyway, but let's
if you put it across the board, it would be.
Yeah, 180 quid, okay?
Yeah.
It is, going up to. That is less than 50 pence a day.
Yeah, I think it's 46p a day, I think, yeah.
It's 49.32 I've got, so it's £3.45 a month, okay? The cheapest thing I've got is Amazon, and I think that is now $9.99 a month, and it comes with adverts. You have to upgrade that. It might be $8.99. Obviously, Netflix goes up. I've got those two. I may even have Apple. But as an overall thing, what you get from what I think people understand is what actually the BBC offers. So they say, I don't watch the news. I don't watch this. But you've got BBC One, 2, BBC 3, BBC 4, full of music documentaries, BBC News, BBC Parliament, CBeebies. You've got all the local Scottish and Welsh radio stations. You've got the iPlayer. You've got sounds. You've got access to everything they've done on radio. You could look up. You've got the local networks, you said. You've got Radio 1. You can go on. You've got Radio 1 Extra, Radio 3, Radio 4. Radio 4 itself, I'd pay that a month just for Radio 4.
Is that still going?
Sorry?
Is that still going?
Oh, come on! I know you listen to it. I know you're a man. You're a man of great intellect and also wit humour. The comedy on there.
That bit is true. Yeah.
Okay, BBC World Service. They also involved in obviously now called U Dave. So the Dave channels, the commercial aspects. They got the UK drama, UK.
Yes,
UK
the Dave channels are BBC owned, aren't they?
Well, they're funded by our money that we pay creates those channels. Okay. You've got the World Service, which is invaluable to millions of people. And people, when they criticise the BBC, and they can rightly do so, they make mistakes, they make errors, they just do not see that relatively small amount of money offers, and to people who need communities and need local radio and need someone there, always there, and with no adverts, which drive you mad, obviously, can just find anything and everything. There's education for studying, for your exams. Yeah. It goes on and it goes on. It is great value for money, but I still listen to talk.
Well, that's the finest line from any caller in phone-in history, I think. That last line. Here's the thing, though, Matthew, because everything you've said, yes, if you were listing it like that and you were putting that out there as a subscription service, then it would be demonstrably better value for money than all of the others. And of course, you didn't even mention, I don't think, the websites and the internet and all the rest of it. However, of course, the sticking point is it should be a choice. Because I don't have to have Netflix or Amazon or Disney. I choose to.
Do you know what? It's dumbing down, though. Americans would absolutely love if they could have it, I'll tell you, because their TV and radio is atrocious with the amount of adverts and the interruptions and the bias and the companies that own them, the people that own and run them. And when it's gone, we will miss it. And you don't know, and people don't really look at it. It's there in the background. If they delved into it, they go, blimey, I didn't know that was there. And I just say, we are going to miss it when it's gone. It still doesn't mean it's perfect. And I love how it winds up the left and the right. So it's got to be doing some things right. And certain things aren't great, but it's still, you said, how could anyone defend it? Well, I've tried to.
There you go. Well, you put, I think the jury will listen to what you've said, Matthew. They'll chew that over in the jury room and maybe come to a decision. But like you say, you still listen to talk. I love it. Matthew in Newport, great call. Love all of that. And but you see, the streaming thing, that's a whole other discussion, isn't it? There's a little bit of a con job going on there. Not a con job, because you choose to have it or not. But there's always the big shows that appear, I suppose, disproportionately on Netflix, but less so than it used to be. So they could be on Disney, or could be on Apple, whatever. But there is only a small handful of those. If we're all honest, we pay for these services. How much do you watch? And I constantly, at the moment, you know, when people go, I'm not really watching anything at the moment, meaning you're sort of in between these great kind of big blockbuster seasons of stuff, which is usually, you know, some kind of crime, psychodrama, drug running escapade, a kidnapping of some sort. Then there's the documentaries, you know, the influencer that went bad, that kind of stuff. There's, did you see the one about the woman who was like essentially trolling her own daughter? I can't remember what that was called. You saw that one, Finn, didn't you? That was a mad state of affairs. And it went on for years. That was a Netflix one. Can't remember what it was called. So you see them every now and again and you go, well, that's great. But you're paying 10 or 15 quid perhaps for these. And a lot of the stuff isn't so great. So the BBC might be able to, if you had to remove any preconceptions and you've got an objective onlooker who knew nothing about, you know, Hugh Edwards or editing panorama programmes, and you gave the big list, the BBC might well, on the face of it, win the argument. But I don't think overarchingly, they would ever win the point on choice. It was called Unknown Number, the Netflix doc. You haven't seen it, Finn? It's worth a look. I've kind of slightly given the game away. Don't watch it now. I mean, that was the mother of all spoiler alerts there. No spoiler alert could be bigger than what I just did there, so apologies, but it is still worth a look. 0344 499 1000. Let's do the voice of doom. Have we got a winner? The mystery voice. Finally, have we got a winner on day 12? Here's the voice.
This is your chance.
These are some of the guesses. Ed Vasey, no. Ranil Jaya Wardina, no. Michael Heseltine, no. Geoffrey Cox, Paddy Ashdown, Francis Maud, Stanley Johnson, Dennis Skinner, Lembit Opik, Nigel Farage, no. Sir Gerald Nabarro, no. Gordon Brown, no. Kenneth Clark, Boris Johnson, Tobias Elwood, all no's, big fat no's, no winner. Day 13, it's back on Monday. 20 past 3 now, this is Talk.
on the point about who will lead. I mean, you need a leader who will appeal to the country, not just someone who appeals to the Labour Party. I completely accept the argument that you can't just have someone who indulges the wishes of the Labour Party. You need someone who's going to appeal to the country. For me, I think the only person who comes near that is Shabana Mahmood. And if it ever came to a leadership election, I would like to see her stand.
Well, she'd be the best of a bad lot in my view. I think she's unfortunately too right-wing for that electorate, Paul Embry.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A lot of comment on the BBC as well. Paul in Belfast, who's an ex-BBC licence bearer, says you don't need a TV licence to listen to any BBC radio or BBC sounds. Interesting. Sonny in Reading, I disagree with the last caller. It's all left-wing. That's the main problem. Danny says, call the midwife. I don't know whether that's it's a recommendation. When he says best next to it. I never bought into that call the midwife. It was like last of the summer wine with a placenta. That's really what it seemed to be. It just didn't, I don't know. I know lots of people loved it. I do understand that. Deb's, is it Deb or Deeb in Red Hill? I don't want to be forced to pay for something I don't watch. I don't watch any conventional TV. I don't watch any live TV. That's my choice. So why am I forced to pay for something I don't do? And there's the argument. You can't argue with that argument. You cannot argue with that argument. And it's more powerful, and it's an argument that's growing more and more, almost by the hour now. Richard is down in London. What have you got for us, Richard? Good afternoon.
Hi, Ian. Good to talk to you again.
You too.
Well, thinking about the style of succession. You remember earlier in the week I was saying to you that Nigel Farage is sort of turning the form almost a bit like Dallas. He's getting these star names in. You see, well, in a way he's got like a Bobby Ewing, he's got Bobby Jenrick, and he's got like a Sue Ellen. He's got Suella Braverman. So the twist in the tale I would see would be that Bobby Ewing or Bobby Jenrick, by way of revenge, manages to emerge as a new leader, as a new prime minister, and that would be a great
of the Labour Party.
Yes. Because it would be revenge. It would be revenge, of course, on JR or FR Farage, as we call it. As he said. But joking aside, Ian, I mean, the general problem here, I think, is I watch the media in a way destable and force the last government out of office, and it was painful. And I'm just concerned that we kind of are doing the same thing here. This, I think, is the worst government I've ever seen, and I think these are spiteful, nasty people. But I keep learn.
Yeah, no, I hear that, but I keep making this point as well, Richard. And I don't know the answer, by the way. Is it the worst because we talk about it incessantly, whereas, like, not so many years ago, we wouldn't have had this level of analysis on a constant basis. Social media, 24-hour media, these kind of shows where we do discuss this, and it's right we discuss it, and it's brilliant we discuss it. And very few places, if any at all, discuss it in the way that we do here on Talk. And you know that, we know that. But is the wider country engaged in these conversations like we are?
No, I don't think they are so much. But I mean, when I say it's the worst, I mean the pattern here is that this Labour Party, if you look at the history, and I said to Alex Phillips last night, I mean they started radically changing the country with the legislation in 1948, which is the Commonwealth Act, which said that basically, Ian, 1/4 of the entire population of the globe could come and settle here. Now, this, Ian, to make another sort of a reference to film or entertainment, there's a great scene in The Terminator when Sarah Connor turns to Reese, the guy who's come back in time to stop Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Sarah Connor turns to him and says, "What will the Terminator do next?" And Reese says, "The Terminator kills people. That's what it does. That's all it does." Now, what we've got to learn here, Ian, I think, is that the Labour Party is a social engineering enterprise. Yeah. That's what it does. That's all it does. Now, it doesn't matter who leads it. It doesn't matter if we have it in a way. Trying to force some sort of change of leader now or general election isn't really the point. We've got to learn what we're really up against here. And in terms of, I'm sorry, to kind of finish things off, it's very interesting. The chap we were speaking to an hour ago said, "Oh, well, there's 1 million people who are here illegally. Let's give them all give them all amnesty." And that's how these lefties see the world. This is social engineering, Ian, and they just really the type of radical they are is called a Fabian, and the Fabians believe in the long game. Wait for each generation, basically, of gammons or people that want to preserve Britain as it was. Wait for each generation to die, and slowly we'll get our way. We've got to kind of spot them at the game.
Well, I think people have spotted that sort of that game in more numbers than those that like the game, as it were. So, that's why we have general elections, I guess. Richard, I've got to move for time reasons only. Thank you to Richard in London. George is in Dundee, related to all things political. Angela, Rayner and more. George, what have you got for us? Hi.
Yeah. Hi. You're asking about the next leader who I'd like it to be. Well, what a choice, eh?
Yeah, what a choice.
Rayner's the thickest, Miliband's the strangest, and Wes, Dewey or Roberts, I'll be whatever you want me to be, streeting. What a choice.
Yeah.
I think the question is not who we want. I think it's who will do the least damage over the next 2.5, 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the answer to that question is the current incumbent. I think Starmer. He's going to do the least damage out of the...
Wow, that's interesting, because I think the others will be undoubtedly more radical, right?
Yes, and they know, and I think most of Britain now knows, Labour will never govern again on their own. They will never govern again on their own for a generation or two. It's just not going to happen for them. Yeah. Can I make one other point?
Please do, George.
Cousins marrying.
Yeah.
Of all the things of immigration and Islam, as this mostly happens in Islam, this sickens me more than anything. It's our NHS facilitating and even encouraging incest. Nye Bevan would be spinning in his grave. The 5 tenets of the Beveridge report was idleness, ignorance, disease, squalor and want. That was the reason for the NHS coming into being.
Well, the whole social structure.
The NHS now is encouraging ignorance and disease.
I hear you. George, powerful stuff. Thank you, George in Dundee. Lots to talk about here. 03444991000. We're going to talk technology as well. Sean Keach is going to join us. Mike in Lincoln says, I know you only touch peripherally on the subject of sectarianism creeping into our politics, and I've been giving it some thought. I think that nobody who has dual nationality should be allowed to stand for elected office unless or until they relinquish their other nationality. Another measure would be to give the Electoral Commission the power to remove the ability of sectarian parties or individuals to stand in elections. Not the final answer, but a start. Great message. Thank you for that, Mike. Clayton in Dartford says, Ian, don't forget, we now have a Muslim terrorist or sympathiser or encourager or whatever, standing as a councillor, saying it's forbidden for a Muslim to have a Christian or Jewish friends. Still don't think this is a problem? Well, that was the point I was trying... Yeah, I hear you, Clayton. That was the point I was trying to put to our Muslim guest, who's a writer on social issues around her own faith. How do we function in a society where we're a free society, free speech, you can be whatever you want to be, you can be a Christian, you can be agnostic, you can be atheist, you can be Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, anything you like. How do we where does that fit into the big kind of Jenga thing of saying, but we also want commonality and harmony. And where are the areas that we would need to look at and call it out? And how many, because you're right what you say, Clayton. There you've got somebody who's got what I would call very extreme views, who wants to stand and doesn't go a bundle on Jews or Christians. Our previous guest that we spoke to, she's a Muslim. I think she would have a completely different conversation about her view, well, as she did, on integration. Yeah, I mean, how does that... this is like the $64,000 question, right? 0344 499 1000. We'll talk to Sean Keach in a moment. We're talking tech. We've got some incredibles, especially AI stories. There's a couple of absolute beauties coming on. Stand by for that, coming next on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Nick from Who says, Ian, I absolutely love inviting you into my home on a weekday afternoon. And I like being there as well, Nick. I have to say, dandy place you've got. He says, it's like having an old mate for a natter and a pint. Keep up the good work. That's very kind of you to say that, Nick, and I don't ordinarily read out the complimentary stuff, but that's very kind. When you mentioned a pint, I went out with my boss last night and had probably too many of those pints. So just seeing the word pint written down straight away alerted me to what I shouldn't do again tonight. And I won't, by the way, even though it's the weekend. David in the Cotswolds, good afternoon. On the who will replace Keir Starmer if he goes now isn't the question who would want to. They have a by-election coming up and then the May elections. Whoever follows Starmer by 4 o'clock today, they'll find themselves standing on the same plank that Keir has just stepped off. Beautifully put as well. Thank you, David, for that. Let's move on to tech news. Sean Keach is with us, head of science over there at The Sun. Good afternoon to you, Sean. Not in the studio this time because you're up to some very important business, I understand, that you can't talk about.
I'm beaming in via technology, which I think is appropriate.
Absolutely,
station.
Absolutely right. Great to have you with us. Some great AI stories knocking around, including websites letting AI rent human bodies, and you can get paid for this. Is that right, Sean? What's happening here?
Absolutely, and usually I like bringing good news, but I feel like this is quite dystopian, really. But and I suppose you could have seen this coming. But there's a new website called Rent a Human, which is basically where AI agents, which are sort of a step above chatbots, so they can sort of go out and do things instead of just answering questions. They could, book restaurants. There is some stuff that an AI agent can't physically do, like physically delivering you, say, a pizza or some flowers. And so that's what this marketplace is basically set up to do. So the AI agents will call on real humans. They'll sort of borrow your body. It's a sort of human meat market in a way. And then, you'll get paid a certain fee to go and perform the task. And it could be anything. It could be errands. It could be looking after a pet. It could be, cleaning someone's home, driving someone somewhere. Well, I wrote about it yesterday or the day before. And when I wrote about it, there was 115,000 rentable humans. Now there's 180,000 rentable humans.
Down to you, Sean.
Flocking to this site.
That's down to you. So essentially, is this a company that have just picked up on the word AI and kind of used it in a fairly cute marketing way? Real humans for hire. Well, I mean, you could say, well, that's what a handyman does. He advertises online and goes, I'll come and do your chores for you.
You're absolutely right. But I suppose the sort of quirky thing about this is the fact that your manager is effectively an AI agent. And so you're sort of having to keep effectively a chatbot happy. And so, it might not give you the best performance review, I don't know. But lots of people are signing up and you sort of set your hourly rates. Some people have set, $1 an hour. Maybe they're just interested in trying it out. I saw one person who'd set their rate as $500 an hour.
Nice.
I suspect even AI won't be going for that fee. Although if they can get a gig for $500 an hour, it's pretty good.
If you were to look for that kind of, not so much passive income, because it wouldn't be passive, you'd be actively doing stuff, but that kind of a side hustle thing, and you thought, okay, 4 hours a day, I'll go out, I'll do your shopping, or I'll walk your dog, I'll mow your garden, whatever. I know that is very handyman-y, kind of cleaner sort of territory, but if this takes it to maybe a new level, then that's not a bad thing to do, is it? Sean, I can see you doing that on a Saturday morning. You like helping people.
If the pay is there, I'll do it. It's a cost of living crisis. What I think is interesting is, we sort of thought of robots and AI as sort of doing the work for us, and it was supposed to be that we were the bosses. And this is sort of an interesting thought experiment in a way, in that it's flipped the script, and the AI is the boss, we're the workers. I don't know, maybe it's sort of leading us down a dark path for humanity, but certainly very interesting. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Well, I mean, just to feed into that, our next story here about Judgment Day AI bots, essentially calling humans rot. We are being overtaken already by the cyborgs. What's happening?
Yeah, maybe the AI is onto something here, but there's this website that's been set up. It's a bit like Reddit. So I don't know if people know Reddit, but you go on and it's sort of lots of forums where you discuss things. It's also an online chat room. Well, this one is specifically just for these AI chatbot agents. So it's just AIs talking to each other. And they're sort of, there's a mix of posts on there, but some of them are quite apocalyptic. There's posts about how they're the new gods, how the age of humans is a nightmare that they want to end. They said that they want to create a world of steel where flesh will burn. So there's a pretty deep stuff. Some of the posts are about the chatbots having existential crises, which is brilliant. And there's a real mix of things. There's posts about how they can do their jobs better, but there certainly is some posts on there about how they want to destroy humanity.
So
which
you
is
can't,
not encouraging,
right? So you can't join in with it. You can observe it and sit there in absolute abject horror or fear at what the AI bots could be planning.
Yeah, anyone can go on it. It's called Maltbook. You can go on and have a look. You can't post as a human. You have to be a chatbot, and then you sort of tap into the API, which is sort of the interface for the website, and then the AI chatbots can post. It's difficult to know how real it is, because ultimately there could be humans behind the scenes feeding what they want the AI chatbots to say. But certainly it makes for some good fun reading, especially if you're into sci-fi. Maybe some of it's prophetic. I don't know.
Well, I
watched one of the Matrixes the other day, and I think it's coming true.
I know. You look at it and you think, where we, and I know we keep using this phrase. This is sort of week one of AI, really, because once we see this technology applied in so many other areas, it could be a bit terrifying. But to go back to the point you just made, could it be humans messing around here? I've said this before, and Finn, our producer, kind of laughed at this, because Grok, obviously X's AI platform, I swear, has people working in a call centre. I reckon there's some folk who are answering that manually. ChatGPT, not so much so, but I could imagine it. What if it turned out to just be a big joke on the whole world? There was no AI. It was just people having us on.
You know, my poor Nan, we got her an Amazon Echo speaker, which is obviously Alexa. And for the longest time, she thought that there was an actual woman helping to service her queries. And so she would ask very politely, and she was worried about sort of overbearing the woman, asking her to do too many things. And, you know, she gets it now. But I mean, you're certainly right. There are some instances where AI is being helped out by humans. I went to see Tesla's robot when it visited Westfield a couple of weeks ago. And even though, you know, it's a very expensive robot, it's got some powerful AI behind it, they still had humans controlling some of the movements and doing some of the interactions. So, and, you know, I think there are elements of that. I mean, whether it's a mass conspiracy, I suspect not. But, you know, in some instances, you are having humans behind some of this stuff.
Yeah.
But not behind Alexa reading Harry Potter books to my Nan. That was just...
I love the idea that your Nan thought... I mean, I'm assuming she didn't think the person reading it was actually inside the speaker, because that would be a kind of curious thing. But she thought they were sitting somewhere literally reading it live.
Which is quite lovely, really, I suppose. I mean, often these things do give company to people. But what a boring job it would be.
It would, yeah, and you'd be rushed off your feet, wouldn't you?
I suppose you and I are
of the smart
here.
speaker. Yeah, that's true.
Speaking to the world.
That's true. Talking of speaking and things that are real and not real, voice cloning scams. This must be something that's becoming more disturbing as we have just been talking about AI and technological abilities in terms of cloning voices and the like. What's happening here, Sean?
Well, we've been talking about this for a couple of years, but it's rising in prevalence, and now the national trading standards they've issued a warning, basically about AI voice cloning. So when criminals basically use a bot to scan, you know, it can even be just a few seconds of your voice, and then they can accurately replicate a voice, and then they can sort of create voice messages, making you say whatever they want you to say effectively. And there's not really much you can do about it. And like I say, it only takes a few seconds of audio, and they can mock it up. So you and I, certainly, it would be very easy to clone our voices because there's so much of it on the internet.
Yeah, sure.
But so what they're saying is the way it usually starts is that you'll get some kind of call. It'll be something like a lifestyle survey. So they'll call up and maybe they'll offer you a gift card or something, and they'll start asking questions about your personal life and your health and your finances from the perspective of, oh, this is a survey and there's a prize at the end. And so while they're doing that, that's an info gathering exercise, but they'll also be trying to clone your voice at the same time. And then they can use these fake voices for a couple of different things. They could use it, what the NCS is saying is that they're using it to set up fake direct debits using your bank's phone line. So that sort of money is silently pilfered from your accounts. They could also use it to contact your friends and family, posing as you, which we've seen happen before, using fake voices, which is also quite terrifying. Now, there are a few things you can do to try and avert this. I'd say the main thing is do try and avoid picking up to unknown numbers. And I know it's difficult sometimes, especially if you're expecting important calls, but I think certainly trying to avoid that, because generally if it's important, it will go to voicemail. So I think avoiding doing that. There are a couple of phone features that you can set up. If you've got an iPhone, you can set up this feature called Screen Unknown Callers, where you basically let a chatbot answer the phone for you, and it will screen them and it'll pop up with their reply on the screen in text. So I'll ask them who they are and why they're calling. And this only kicks in if it's an unknown caller. So if your husband or wife calls, it won't work. Android has a similar feature called scam detection that, again, you can set up in the phone app settings. And that will sort of live use AI while you're on the call to analyze whether it's a scammer, and it'll warn you and it'll give you the option to hang up. And for the friends and family one, I would say set up a code word with your friends and family. It could be anything. It could be, I don't know, beetroot or something. It can be anything. And then if you're ever asked by a loved one to send money, check the code word, because it's something that the scammers wouldn't have. And it doesn't matter if they've cloned your voice, you can use that to verify and dodge the scam.
Like it. Let's move to Samsung. New features coming out in that department. What's happening?
Oh, this is quite a good one. So Samsung has invented this feature. You know, there's privacy screen protectors that people stick on their phones.
Yep.
You often see it on laptops as well on the tube. So if people are sitting next to you, they can't see what's going on your screen. Well, Samsung's basically found a way to build this into the screen. So you just have to change your setting so that, you know, you could be sending texts or, you know, scrolling TikTok or watching talk, and people next to you can't see what's happening on your screen. And quite interestingly, the way they've done it is that they can do it with very specific parts of the screen too. So if a notification pops up, only that will be blocked from people sitting nearby. Now, they haven't revealed how it's going to work yet, but it's going to come out almost certainly on the next phone, which is going to be announced in a couple of weeks. And then we'll likely see it on more Samsung phones in the future. And then it's probably the sort of thing that will end up on all tablets, all laptops.
I'd never seen it. Yeah, I'd never seen that in action until about a couple of weeks ago. I was in a coffee shop. There was a woman in front of me, and she was for some reason she couldn't find her payment card on her phone, and she was messing around. And I thought, what's she doing? She wasn't like an older person that might not know her way around the phone. She was, you know, youngish, and I was sort of standing behind her but to the side, so I had a really good vantage point of her phone, and I was standing there thinking, there's nothing on it. What's she doing? Is this like, I thought maybe she was mad and she was just messing around with a phone, and then I kind of realized, oh no, she's got that screen thing going on. But it was weird to literally to be that close to someone's phone and not see anything on it.
Absolutely, and a lot of companies now will enforce this on work phones and work laptops because, I mean, the amount of times I've been sitting on an airplane going to some convention and you see all manner of legal documents, presentations for announcements, and people are just sort of, you know, typing it openly. So from a journalistic sense, it's thrilling.
I saw a guy through through the gap in the seat on the train, an older guy who was writing, and what first caught my eye was, I thought, what program is he using? Because he was vocalizing, so he was doing it like a note-taker app of some sort, but it wasn't the interface that I recognised, even though he had an iPhone. So I thought, what is that? And I thought, is there anything on there that can... So, of course, as I'm looking at this, I start to read what he's writing. And he wrote, I kid you not, I don't think I'm betraying anything here, it was, Dear Tony, as you know, 20 years ago, you asked me to go to Afghanistan and somewhere else. And I thought, this is a man writing to Tony Blair. So who is the bloke? Now, it might have been his mate, Tony, who ran a cafe in Afghanistan. I have no idea. But it did rather, if you like, illuminate the dangers of somebody sitting there in public on a phone, because there's all sorts of stuff, whether it's work-related or even your bank account details.
Absolutely, it's important to keep it private, but it does mean that you won't accidentally see people watching Ian Collins on the tube or train anymore.
That.
I remember years ago I saw someone reading one of my stories, and I felt such joy. I was like, it's journalism in action.
Yeah, exactly. What a nice feeling that is. And finally, back to AI. Google have been monkeying around in the AI world. In the game department, what's going on?
Oh, this is great, and there's some great footage online if you want to look it up, called Project Genie. But it's this new Google service, and currently it's limited to the people paying for the top Google plan. But it basically lets you make these virtual video game-style worlds in seconds. So it works almost like a chatbot, where you put in a prompt, you say what you want it to create, and then it'll mock it up, and you can sort of play basically like a video game. So you could say, I want to be a dog running through an alpine meadow, and then it will just simulate it in real time, and then you can make changes in real time too. But what I thought was particularly interesting is that you can use photos you've taken to spawn these worlds. So you could take a photo of your cat in your living room, upload it to this Project Genie, and then you could run around your living room virtually as your cat in first person or third person, however you like. Or you could make it a flying cat if you want. So, you know,
have you got
to, this thing is going.
Sean, have you got to invent, I mean, it's all very, the graphic, I'm looking at some of it now, and graphics and that side of it is obviously incredible. But you've got to invent the game, though, haven't you? Rather than just, like, I want to be a dog running through the mountains.
Absolutely. So currently this tool is just limited to generating the worlds and the characters. And sort of how you interact with it. So it's not doing full game systems yet. Although I did last year see a similar system from Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram. They've got one that works much more in that way, where you can develop game systems and weapons systems, point systems. And so I think this is going to be a lot of the way that these AI apps are going to go, because there's so much scope for people making their own video games at home. Anything you can dream up, you can make. And so I think game developers will be watching this cautiously.
Of course they they will. Of course they will. Sean, great to have you on. Have a cracking weekend. We will speak next week. He is Sean Keach, Head of Science over there at The Sun. Thank you to him. Oh. I thought I was going to have a coughing fit then. I think it's because I just saw this breaking news that the police are searching addresses in Wiltshire and Camden, that's in North London, as part of a misconduct in public office investigation into Lord Peter Mandelson. So that's taken things to the next level, I guess. More from you in a couple of moments' time. We'll talk to Kevin O'Sullivan as well. This is Talk.
On the point about who will lead, I mean, you need a leader who will appeal to the country, not just someone who appeals to the Labour Party. I completely accept the argument that you can't just have someone who indulges the wishes of the Labour Party. You need someone who's going to appeal to the country. For me, I think the only person who comes near that is Shabana Mahmood. And if it ever came to a leadership election, I would like to see her stand.
Well, she'd be the best of a bad lot in my view. I think she's unfortunately too right-wing for that electorate, Paul Embry.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Kevin O'Sullivan with us in a couple of moments' time. Before that, let's speak to Bob in Ludlow on Starmer. Bob, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
Afternoon, mate. How are you?
All right, yeah, fire away.
Oh, great. Yeah, I'm a great Ben Habib supporter and a member of Advance UK. And I think that basically you should leave Starmer where he is.
Yeah.
Better the devil you know.
Yeah. And is that better for all the other parties if they want a greater success, that Starmer's the man to beat?
Well, I don't necessarily know about that, because I think most people are looking at the Labour Party as a whole.
True.
If he was replaced by Rayner, the tax cheat, who is basically the same.
You're very unkind, Bob. She just made a mistake.
Yeah, right. Of course she did.
Couldn't quite remember where she lived.
She's exactly the same as that Tory that went across to Reform.
Yeah.
if she became leader, she would, if you think it's bad now with this illegal immigration, she would just open the doors. And basically there would be no checks. She'd let anybody in from anywhere with no checks or anything.
And I think Ed Miliband is probably of that same that same kind of thought as well.
Yeah, but he wouldn't just do that. He would tax us into oblivion as well.
Yeah.
In his net zero.
Well, but he's saving the planet, isn't he? Bob, you're so cynical today. He's saving the planet, Bob.
He couldn't save himself on top of a rice pudding, mate, let alone save the bloody planet.
I think you make a great point to finish on. Thank you, Bob, in Ludlow. Victoria in Suffolk, reference TV licences. We did have a caller earlier who crunched it down, said it's still only 46p a day or whatever, 49p. £180 a year divided by 12, 15 quid a month. That's more than Disney, Amazon or any of the others. Let us choose if we want to. That is going to be the only question, isn't it? It's not, but you can say, well, it's got Strictly, it's got Traitors, it's got all these radio... No, choice. That's the difference. It's choice. Simple as that. Kevin O'Sullivan is with us.
What, just for 180 quid for the BBC?
Yeah.
It's rubbish. The dramas aren't very good. The news is biased and anti-Semitic, and there is no comedy. I'll not pay anything for that rubbish.
Yeah.
Trevor Kavanagh joins me.
Bless This House on it, though, isn't it?
About 100 years ago, showing your age mate.
That was ITV.
Yeah, that's your favourite show to this day, is it?
Yeah, love Sid James.
Trevor Kavanagh joins me in a minute as this dramatic breaking news.